All right. In honor of our special guest today, TikTok, Time to Rock, I'm joined by the one and only David Wood. We're going to be getting an update on what he has been up to. We're going to take a look at his plans for the future, and then we're going to discuss where he sees Islam and Christianity heading and how we, as Christian apologists, as apologetists against Islam, we can play a role in the future of these religions. Had a couple super chats I wanted to highlight from Mel J. Super sticker saying, good job. Thank you very much for that donation. I know there was another one which I forgot to highlight. Oh, there it is. Thaddeus Hatu said, remember, Islam is the fastest growing religion. A very appropriate comment for today, and appropriately with a couple laughing faces there, since it's a bit of a joke for Muslims to claim that this is a good reason to believe in the truth of Islam. In says Islam is the only violent religion left. The rest have grown up. A good thing to keep in mind as we go through this today. I'll go ahead and open us in a word of prayer, as I typically do. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together. We thank you for the technology that allows us to connect with believers and unbelievers from all around the world. We thank you that we are living in a time that gives us unprecedented access to the Muslim world. We pray that you will raise up many apologists and missionaries to the Muslim world. We know that there are literally billions of Muslims who are in need of Christ, who are in need of the gospel. And we pray that you continue to raise up new missionaries to this field that is only beginning to be tapped. We ask that you be with us today, that you guide our discussion and you prevent us from theological error. We ask that anyone watching, whether live or later on a replay, approach the material with an open mind, that they not simply dismiss what we have to say because they don't want to hear it, but rather they consider it and decide whether what we have to say is true or false. Along those lines, we'd ask that what is true is remembered and applied, and what is false or useless is simply forgotten. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. What you didn't see is that I accidentally thought I was live and I was not. So we already went through this once, but
We already
now
we
David
already
had a
did
chance to practice.
we already did a whole show, and then he wasn't even live. It's pretty embarrassing.
You had a chance to practice. I typically ask my guests this question the first time they're on the show is, why are you a Christian?
Wow, what a great question, Thaddeus. I said that because the first time when he thought he was live, I said, "Seriously, Thaddeus? That's what you're going to ask me?" I made a whole video about that. Anyway, it's pretty simple. Jesus is Lord. He's proven it by the claims he made and the miracles he's performed, and by rising from the dead. And so, what else am I going to believe? But if anyone wants to go into more detail, you can find my full testimony on YouTube. That would be the super short version.
Yeah, the first time you answered that, you spoke about how the evidence
Mm-hmm.
leads one to Christianity. And I phrase that question that way specifically to give people that opportunity, because that's the reason I'm a Christian. I could say I grew up in a church and I could give my testimony about how I came to know Christ. But really, the reason I'm a Christian is because that's where the evidence leads. That um, when you look at things objectively from a historical standpoint, Christianity stands up really well. And when you do the same for Islam, well, it doesn't. It doesn't even come remotely close.
No, it's this weird situation where, and that's something you find, like, if you look at the evidence for the resurrection, like, even if you're an atheist, even if you want to say, okay, I'm not going to believe it because it's a supernatural claim and I don't believe in the supernatural or something like that. When you take a look at it, here's what you do find. Oh, all the evidence we have tells us that he died, and all the evidence we have tells us that his followers were at least going around claiming that he was alive afterwards, and that these guys are willing to go to their horrible, bloody deaths proclaiming that message. And so you're left with kind of a situation where how do I explain this? How do I explain what happened and what these guys saw? They saw something. I'm saying even atheists and agnostic scholars right now will acknowledge the disciples saw something that convinced them that Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them. So the question is, what's there? Whereas in Islam, if you look at there's just nothing there. If they say, because the Quran's been perfectly preserved, that's how we know. The second you start looking into it, you start finding, manuscript differences, and they got the different kirat, and their sources are filled with narrations about entire chapters coming up missing, and large passages being forgotten, and verses being eaten by a sheep. And so it's like, it's not, here's all this evidence, but I'm a little skeptical, so I'm not really maybe I don't believe it or something like that. It's like, the evidence you guys said was there is not there. In fact, the evidence is the exact opposite of what you just said. And so, pretty different scenarios there.
Servant Girl says Christianity is real and life-changing. Jesus is worthy. Amen to that. Iqbal Swati, a Muslim who is a regular on this channel, says he is a Christian because Jesus rise from the dead. And then he added some laughing emojis. But yes, take off those laughing emojis. And yes, absolutely. Why wouldn't you believe someone is who he says he is if he rises from the dead as proof of that?
Yeah, like why would a Muslim? I mean, according to the Quran, Jesus raised people from the dead. I mean, we shouldn't believe in people based on that. We shouldn't believe, someone performing those kinds of miracles. We shouldn't believe in that. Very interesting. Very interesting how they'll come up with some ridiculous like argument for Islam based on total deception. It's just lies. And then when the truth is presented, they'll just ha ha ha. That's so dumb. Interesting stuff. What that religion does to people.
And Sola Scriptura said, Islam is the fastest growing religion, so do garbage dumps. And that's true. Garbage dumps are growing pretty rapidly. Just coincidental analogy there, though. So we also have our mutual friend, El Iso Elohim, in the chat saying, hello all. Did you by chance see the artwork she did for my most recent video?
No, where's that?
I will pull that up. And give me a second because I didn't actually plan to, I didn't think of that ahead of time. That is my bad. I will pull that up. While I'm doing that.
You call yourself a host?
Yeah, I know. I'm terrible. Green Eagle said, how do we support David Wood's ministry these days?
Oh, I mean, well, I'll be coming out with content here and there, and people can watch that and share that, and that's pretty much the best way.
So you're supposed to talk longer than that, so I had to bring up.
Well, I know you're going to ask me like 900 questions, so I'm not going to get in the habit of giving these long answers.
Yeah, but I had to bring up the thumbnail from Elle, and that took me a second.
Wait a second, I see. Wait, what? Thumbnail? I'm looking at your thumbnails.
My video before this, which was it's about Andrew Tate, but it's nicknamed Super Shirk Brothers. It's a picture of Muhammad.
Oh, I see it. I see it. I see it. No, I see it right now. I'm on your channel. Super Shirk Bros. That's Andrew Tate. And is that hijab? Who's that?
That's Muhammad. So in the video.
Oh, okay, Muhammad. I was like, who are the Shirk Bros?
Yes. So that's in the video, of course, as you know, Tate compared himself to God indirectly by giving that tweet. And then I say that he's just following the example of his prophet, because, of course, Muhammad also
Savior and God, and he'll retweet it. And then some Muslim on Twitter will say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be saying that since you're a Muslim now. And other Muslims will say, what are you talking about? He's a brand new Muslim. Stop judging him. And so it's there's something correct about saying, hey, someone's new, don't be too hard on them. But it's like, dude, one, if you haven't learned that by now, you got some problems. But two, which Muslim women have been pointing out, they don't treat female converts like that. They start immediately harassing them into doing what they're supposed to do. And so it is interesting to watch.
Yeah, and the reason that the video is called that, or I originally wrote the video and then I got the idea to call it Super Shirk Brothers, and then I made the whole thing Mario themed. So I spent quite a bit of time on that video, editing it, and with myself as Mario, and collecting coins and doing all kinds of things, and then interspersed with that are segments of Mario's voice where he says things like "Mamma Mia" when they're it's a take quote, or one of his followers quotes, or whatever the case may be. So it's pretty funny. I would say, but
seems really
I'm
mean.
biased.
Seems really mean and very non-Christian of you.
Yeah, I know. I mean like that, and I follow your example, unfortunately. So we'll go ahead and get into the actual questions that I have for today, starting with what you've been up to. So, most people watching are probably aware by now, although I know that's not really the case for everyone, because I have a video on the Archives channel, the David Wood Archives channel, that is titled "Why David Deleted His Channel." And it's just your video of, your reasons from before you actually deleted it, explain why you were going to. And that video gets like 200 views a day from people search. It's all YouTube search, people searching out basically, why did David delete his channel? Because they don't actually know. So maybe you could give us a very brief summary of your reasons for why you ended up gifting that channel to Hatun, why you did a reset on YouTube.
Well, it's started on YouTube in, I think, 2009. And back then it was like the greatest thing in the world. Hyperbolically speaking a little bit, it was really, really awesome to be able to share information instantly with people around the world. I mean, back then, Nabil and I, when we started on YouTube, we were mainly just posting on YouTube for people who couldn't be wherever we happened to be speaking or debating. So we started making some videos for them, and then you just realize very quickly, wait a minute, I go and speak at this place, and let's say there are 200 people there, but then I make a video and 50,000 or 100,000 or something like that might watch it. And so isn't this now, haven't we entered into just a different world right now? Like, before the printing press and after the printing press, or before television and after television, you just entered a new realm. And so I was in that pretty early on. But even though YouTube was really, really great and awesome in 2009, and we were posting on it even before that, but that's when we started our Act 17 channel. We were on a channel that a Muslim gave us before that, and he gave it to us just because he wanted to see what our arguments were before we debated. And so it was kind of a deal where we're going to post our previous debates here so that he would be informed about them, and he would give us his channel. Because back then, people don't remember this. Back then, like if you came out with a channel in 2006, you could post hour-long videos or whatever. But then they changed it in like 2007 or 2008. They changed it to where new channels could only post 10-minute videos. And so if you wanted to post an entire debate, you had to post it in a bunch of 10-minute clips, which was really annoying. But the original channels before that rule were like these legacy things where you could still post longer videos. And so he's like, hey, are you going to before you come out here and debate, are you going to post your older debates? We're like, we don't have a channel. We're not going to post a bunch of 10-minute clips. He's like, oh, I'll give you this channel. And we're like, oh, so we posted on that for a while. And then so 2009, we started our regular channel. But anyway, point is, since then, even though YouTube was great in 2009, 2010, it started getting worse. It started getting worse. And I can even like pinpoint the moment. It started getting worse after the Anders Breivik massacre in Norway. Even though this dude's a white supremacist, wasn't attacking Muslims. He was attacking like this like leftist vacation spot for teens or something like that. Muslims jumped on that and started complaining to YouTube, see, this is going to lead to violence against us. And just kept complaining and complaining and complaining, even though none of us are advocating. I mean, there are people who are advocating violence. It wasn't us, right? We're just criticizing Muhammad, and we're criticizing Muhammad and the Quran. But they use that, all this criticizing Muhammad and the Quran is going to lead to people like this coming to kill us. And then they started taking stuff down. YouTube started taking stuff down. And basically every single year since then, every single year I've been on YouTube since then, it's gotten worse. Like the number of completely bogus strikes you gets worse every single year, to the point where by last year and earlier this year, I was getting between 1 and 3 completely bogus strikes. It's never for actually violating any rule. It's always, here's why we took this video down. It's got nothing to do with anything in the video. And then I have to spend, fortunately, sometimes they'll clear it up in a couple of hours, but other times it'll take weeks to get squared away. And so it's mainly like earlier this year, it was mainly, okay, I'm spending, sometimes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks arguing with YouTube about why they should reinstate this video and end this strike. And based on everything I know, they only keep getting worse. So this is going to be worse next year. What is it going to be? Where I spend all day, every day, having to argue with these guys for all the content they're taking down? And it just got to the point where it's like, okay, at what point do you have to realize I need to rebuild in a better fashion where they can't do this? And so it's just that. And a lot of people, if they have 700,000 subscribers, are not going to throw that away. For whatever reason, I don't, whatever would cause a normal person to not want to give up a 700,000 subscriber channel, I don't have that. I don't care. I think it's interesting and fun to do stuff like that. So, and I kind of think it's hilarious to do stuff like that. So anyway, I don't have a problem with it. So it's mainly someone needs to figure out how to operate in a way where they don't have that complete power to just shut you down instantly. And to make you waste all your time. And so, so I had to get to the point where I was just going to rebuild. But so that's what I'm doing now.
Very good. I've heard from Hatun that when she uploads a video to that channel, it always gets a strike. Like every single time, basically, she uploads a video, it gets a strike, and then she appeals it, and they always win the appeal. But it kills several days to a week at a time every time they upload a video. Were you experiencing something like that with the channel?
Oh, you mean people understand how much it sucks when they start coming after your channel? With me, it wasn't. I mean, it was occasionally banning a new video that comes out. Again, I don't, and neither does Hatun. I didn't post anything that violated any rules. I understand what the rules are. I don't violate them. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't criticize Muhammad or the Quran. They don't, but they would inevitably ban videos that only do that. And you'd get a message saying this is, promoting hate speech against a protected group. And then you have to argue with them, guys, if that's not what your rule means, you giant idiots. Right. So, but with me, it wasn't, brand new videos. It was mainly older videos. So again, 1 to 3 times per month, you find out some video that you posted 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or something like that has been banned, and completely bogus scenario. So anyway, part of the reason because I was originally going to delete the channel, and then it was okay, well, why not just give it to someone else or something like that. but I deleted almost everything off of it, mainly because, hey, if I leave all this stuff up, it's just endless hassle. You're never going to be able to accomplish anything on that channel the way they come after it. And so it was, okay, let me delete all this stuff and then give it to Hatun, and that way she has access to the subscribers. But yeah, apparently they still come after it anyway. So it's it's a rough situation. But again, that's part of the reason for needing to come up with an alternative way of doing things. But it's you kind of have to Frankenstein your system, because YouTube does a lot. YouTube was a really, really great system for getting content very quickly to people around the world. So if you want to replace that with something else, and I don't mean completely replacing YouTube, because you can still obviously use YouTube, but your long-term plans have to include something else. And so how do you sort of piece together stuff that performs all of the same functions that YouTube did, but without being completely dependent on YouTube?
Excellent. I just had a super chat from Thaddeus. No wonder why YouTube safety team love Muhammad. Good boy. Jump, roll over. Good boy. Reminds me of the Boom Boom Room with the YouTube trust and safety team. Wonder if that's what he's referencing.
But by the way, yeah. I think that is. I forgot about that. But yeah, that's how we were ending that with the guy saying that to Muhammad. But yeah, I mean, along those lines, like my blog just got taken down by YouTube. I mean, not by Google a few days ago. It's like my blog, I haven't even posted on my blog in forever, and it got taken down for hate speech. And then, and it's like, what hate speech? All we would do on that blog is point out stupid stuff from the Muslim sources, but they took it down. And I submitted multiple appeals, and finally, I just got the message today they reinstated it. But notice now it's the same thing for old blogs that I don't even use anymore. And the only reason it's still up is because people still use it. It has lots of articles, lots of compilations of sources and so on that people go to for quick reference and so on. So I left it up, even though I don't really use it anymore. But it's just interesting that, again, every year they're coming at you more. I mean, back in the day, Google didn't have a problem with you criticizing Muhammad. Now all of a sudden they do, but well, it doesn't actually violate any other rules to criticize Muhammad. So you can get them to put it back up if you argue with them long enough. But notice it looks like it might just be the same situation where, hey, I wouldn't mind keeping that up for people, but am I going to want to keep arguing about it if they keep doing it? If they keep taking it down and then I argue with them and they put it back up, is it really worth it versus coming up with a totally, with some other way of storing all that information that's there?
So Islamic Origins asked if you think it's Muslims targeting you, giving false flags and whatnot that's causing these things, or you think it's YouTube itself?
I don't know. Well, I don't think YouTube actually cares. I don't think YouTube actually cares about anything. I don't think they care about hate speech and so on. They care about keeping their advertisers happy. And so they have to crack down on stuff, because if they don't, their advertisers will pull ads. And that's something all the big social media companies have to deal with. That's something that Elon is struggling with right now, because you want your company to be profitable, but the advertisers say, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we're not going to run these, millions of dollars worth of ads. And so you've got some decisions. To make. But I know for a fact, there are very organized movements to complain to YouTube about my videos. I'm saying that because I've seen the videos where there are like tutorials on how to complain about my videos, right? It's like, go here, then click this, then click that, then click this, then enter this as your explanation and so on. And so I know YouTube constantly gets harassed about my content. I'm sure there are Muslims who work at YouTube. Are they targeting my videos? I don't know. But then there's this other thing where, in order to save money, they've just programmed bots. They've programmed bots to sort of go through and take down content. And you can spot it when it's a bot situation, because those are the ones you can normally get restored pretty quickly. Something gets flagged because a bot is programmed that whenever, kill them is used in a video, then the video gets flagged and taken down. And then you explain, I'm not saying kill them. I'm quoting Muhammad saying kill them. I didn't say that. He said, I'm just quoting him to expose it. So there's all kinds of problems. One, they as time goes on and as the advertising companies put more and more pressure on YouTube to get rid of hate speech, YouTube has to come up with ways to go after hate speech. But notice it's actually very hard to monitor all the content. You'd have to do it well. You'd have to pay people to go through all the content, and that would be very expensive. And so they don't want to do that. They want to do it as cheaply as possible. And so they program bots to do it. But bots don't understand what you're saying. Bots don't understand if you're saying Muhammad said this or something like that. So I mean, I really think it's kind of a combination of things. It's people complaining about stuff, a screwed up bot system, lazy people who don't do their jobs very well. It doesn't have to be Muslims. It could be, I mean, it could just be people think it's wrong to make fun of Muhammad, that poor, wonderful guy. How dare you? I'm deleting your video. And can be Muslims, but you know, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But whatever it is, it's messed up, and it keeps getting worse all the time.
Yeah, I think that you made a good point there. Right around the start of COVID, YouTube announced that they're going to rely more heavily on the algorithms, the automated strikes system. They nominally said it was because of COVID, but it was really to save money.
Just so you know, it looks like Elon is being forced to do something similar, because I've gotten 2 takedowns already on Twitter since Elon took over. I appealed them both. The strikes were removed for both of them, so I won both those appeals. But there was nothing in the tweets that violated any rules or came even close to it. It was me just criticizing something. So it looks like bots are being programmed to sift through content, and hopefully that they get better. But that's kind of the problem. You set up this team of this army of bots to go on a banning spree, but then in order to appeal, that goes to a human reviewer. But the human reviewers are human, right? So bots don't understand anything you're saying. Humans do understand what you're saying, but they're biased, right? They have political and religious and everything else biases and so on. So it's I don't know that there's an actual correct solution here. It's just a problem, right? Because bots aren't biased apart from how you program them, but they're stupid and don't understand anything. And human beings are, they do understand what you're saying, but they're, they do what they want. They have a will, and it could be a good will or a bad will. So anyway, apart from really, I think what they need is like some sort of system where, guys, if this is your job, if you're a content moderator, learn these rules very, very well. And if you are going to err on the side of more of less banning, right? So if it's debatable, don't ban it, don't delete it. And if you ban stuff that shouldn't be banned and we find out about it, then you've got a problem. Like you've got to strike as the content moderator, and 3 strikes and you're out, because these guys just seem to feel free to just ban anything they don't like. Now, how that's going to work, I don't know. It seems like it's weird, because it seems like you need sort of a way to appeal your appeals when the person who rejected your appeal is obviously wrong. But it's weird, because if you do that, then you just need like this hierarchy of, I don't know. That's the point. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if any of these systems are going to do that, where they give people the opportunities, because then people are just going to keep arguing all the way up the scale. So I don't know. It's rough stuff. So anyways, it's like, I look at YouTube and all these platforms and stuff. I'm like, I can't stand you guys, you scumbags, the way you treat people. But I don't know exactly how they could do it better, given that their main concern is making money on their platforms.
Yeah, I've seen that the human moderators are expected to make a decision in like 30 seconds. Like it'll show them like a 20-second out of context clip that has been flagged as the most likely to be violating the terms. And then they're supposed to, just make a snap decision, because if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because it is very expensive to have human beings watching content. And most videos are only bringing in $1 of ad revenue or something. So they want to make a very quick decision. But and I think this is probably what happened with your videos often is when you only have a few seconds out of context, it's really hard to tell whether it's satire or whether you're
Yeah.
actually mean what you're saying.
And because they don't, when you when you submit an appeal, they didn't tell you what in that video was hate speech or something like that, right? They just said, this video is blocked for hate speech. You're like, that was a 3-hour live stream. What did you see? What was it in that video that is hate speech? Because you're not telling me, so I don't even know what to I don't even know what to respond to. And then so you submit an appeal, and then we've rejected it. And it's like there are like 50 things in there that you could have just gone to. Because notice, let's say it's a bot. The bot will flag something and say at 1 hour, 32 minutes and 27 seconds, this guy said, kill them all or something like that. And you appeal, you don't know what you're appealing. You don't know, oh, here's what I was talking about in that part. You don't know what you're just saying. What are you talking about? There's no hate speech in there. But then the person might go to there and you might be on a rant. You might be making fun of something. You might be mocking. You might be imitating Muhammad or something like that. But you're right. They just watched that little clip. Oh, my goodness, that is hate speech. Look right here. He said, I've been commanded to fight people until they say there's no God but Allah. That's such hate speech, man. Like, I'm quoting him, you morons. Anyway, bad situation.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, I mean, so notice again, that's why I actually understand the difficult spot that they're in. Like, what's the solution? Not ban anything? Well, then it's like endless supply of like child porn and bomb building instructions. So you got to come up with some rules. And some people say, just content that's illegal. But I think it's fine if you ban content that if you make rules against racist content or something like that. I have no problem with making rules like that. It's just whatever rules they come up with, they inevitably abuse them to target content that's not violating the rules, and it's just a stupid situation.
Have a super chat from Joseph. I left Islam because of you, David Wood. God bless. Always wonderful to hear people leaving Islam. So my next question to you, we now kind of have an idea of why you left YouTube, or sort of left YouTube anyway. I get comments like basically every single day on the David Wood archives, people asking how to find you, where can they find your content now? And I answer, but it's kind of complicated, right? You have multiple means that you're getting out content. You're doing a lot of live streams. What would you say to someone as the best way to follow your material?
It's going to depend on what kind of content people want, because part of what I'm doing now is dividing up everything, and like part of it over here, part of it over there, so that the stuff that is constantly targeted is not associated with the sort of content that's relatively pretty safe. So yeah, it would kind of depend, but I would say wait a little long, because I'm not done setting up. So that's why I'm not running around telling people, here's what you need to do, because I'm still in the long process of getting things. Because here's the thing: when you spend 12 years doing things one way and then you get totally burned on it, and you say, okay, I'm deliberately trying to set it up so that doesn't happen again. Because keep in mind, things are going to keep changing over the next 5-10 years. I don't want to be in a situation 5 years or 10 years from now where I'm in the same position. Oh, now it's gotten so bad that I want to burn all this to the ground. But keep in mind, I mean, I'm totally new to doing this in a different way than on YouTube. So going to take a little while to figure it out, but I mean, we are figuring out. I have it in the head of, okay, I need something that does this. I need something that does that. I need something that does this, something that do this. And you can kind of Frankenstein it all together, and this will be better than YouTube. But all of that stuff requires either paying someone to do that, or learning a brand new program, an entire new system to do that, and so on. Learning how this, how this algorithm on this alternative thing works and stuff like that, because you have to pay attention to stuff like that. So anyway, it's it'll take a little. So I would say for people who really want to be on board with everything, just wait a little long. I could say go to this channel, go to that channel, go to this channel. You're going to get some stuff right now, but yeah, for most people, just relax. It'll come out, and you won't be able to miss it. You won't be able to miss it, because I'm going to make dope stuff.
Oh, that makes sense. YouTube's very good at recommending content you want to see. So you don't actually even have to be subscribed to the channels that David's posting stuff on, or live
That by the
streaming on,
way,
or whatever.
that's part of it. That wasn't the main reason for giving up the 700,000 subscriber channel, but it was part of that. Subscribers aren't nearly as important as they used to be. I don't mean viewers aren't important. Of course, obviously, if you're posting content, people need to watch it. I mean, people always looked at that in the past, that number of subscribers, that was massively important. Now it's not. And I even tested it early on. Like the first video I posted on a new channel that has nothing to do with Islam or anything. I put up a Philosophy Underground channel. I posted one video. I forget what it got, like 80 or 90,000 views. But notice that's similar to what a video would do on my 700,000 subscriber channel. So I concluded a while back. It's not the 700,000 subscribers, because most of your subscribers don't watch your stuff. If you've had a channel for 12 years, I mean, there are people who subscribed 10 years ago and don't watch your stuff anymore. There are people who only watch certain kinds of content. In other words, they subscribe for every once in a while when you post a video on a certain topic that they're interested in, they'll watch that. But they're not watching all your content. What I found is that if you have like 700,000 subscribers, there's like this core of 30 to 50,000 that really watch your stuff. And based on their reaction to what you post, then YouTube or whatever system recommends it to other people to watch it, who are similar to them. So the theory is you just need a way of staying in contact with those, like the real core, your actual core audience. And if you can sort of, again, Frankenstein a system together for reaching those people, apart from YouTube giving them the reminder, I don't think it matters where your stuff is. Like the channels I'm putting up now, they're disposable. These are disposable channels. The moment I see YouTube starts banning them or striking them and targeting them, I'll just delete the channel and put the content somewhere else. So the idea is, if and by the way, this is one of the problems over the past couple months, coming up with an alternative system to the YouTube recommendation system for how your content's getting to people. The problem is there is nothing apart from that that's going to work with everyone. And what I mean is, some people will join the community and then they can get notifications through the app. Some people you might be able to notify, like on Twitter or something like that. Some people, like I have an email list. I have an email list of like 10,000 people now. Well, guess what? That's going to work with some people. That's not going to work with others. In other words, some people aren't going to their email to find out what they're going to watch on YouTube. I've looked into giving people actual text messages. That turns out to be very expensive if you're trying to do it for like hundreds of thousands of people. So it's kind of, how do you fit it together where, okay, if you put all these, let's say 6 or 7 ways of reaching people together, can you get to that 30 to 50,000 people using this combined approach? Because notice, once you do, it doesn't matter where the video is. You're notifying your core audience, the people who like to watch everything you put out. And if you can come up, it wouldn't matter. You could say, oh, it's over here on BitChute or something like that, or it's over here on this brand new YouTube channel. You can instantly notify people. So anyway, that's the mystery that will be solved in the near future. Because
Yeah, I've been very impressed with how well people have found your new content. Just from my own experience, my own channel, where I see all the analytics data, I agree completely. Subscribers basically don't matter. I mean, they matter a tiny bit because of that.
Yeah, it helps. Yeah, it helps to have some people watching your stuff. But right now, it's like your core audience, and then how they react to it, that determines what YouTube's going to do with your video. And so it's can you come up with a way around that does the same thing, but that you control. So that's the goal. Everything else is secondary to that. You figure that out, you've beat the system.
We've talked about it a little bit already, but it's been 5 months since you made this switch. Sounds like there's been some bumps in the road. Maybe you want to talk a little bit more about the difficulties you've encountered, maybe not. But do you have any regrets? Do you regret making this choice?
Oh no, zero. Zero. It's like way better. Like even though I'm not in full swing right now, but even just not having to deal with a bunch of like every time I was dealing with some stupid fake strike and having to argue with YouTube, it was the entire time. It's like, this is seriously how I'm spending my time today. Like, because keep in mind, I would like, oh, here's the video I want to post tomorrow. And in order to post this video tomorrow, then, okay, I'm going to have to wake up. I'm going to have to prepare the content. Then I have to record. Then I'm going to edit. Then I have to get it out. And you wake up and then there's just like, oh, we're striking this video from 7 years ago that has nothing to do with what we're actually saying you did. But it's flagged by a bot. So notice, before you can even think about getting the other video up, you have to deal with this ridiculous situation. And then sometimes would spend 8-9 hours or something like that. Again, assuming I don't have to argue with these guys for weeks or something like that. But it might take 8 or 9 hours that day of arguing with YouTube, and then they actually fix it. But that just messed up your plans for that day. So anyway, the entire time that's happening, it's like, I could be making a video right now. Instead, I'm arguing with a moron.
Fair enough.
And it's not like I'm arguing with someone and there's a point to it. Like if I'm arguing with someone about the existence of God and there's a point to it all, it's meaningful. It's like I am doing the biggest, most idiotic waste of time in history. So to go from like doing that all the time to not having to deal with that is just awesome. And then when you start you start getting glimpses of, oh, I did this, and even though this channel has 10,000 subscribers, the video got 80,000 or 70,000 or 90,000 subscribers or something like that. And so you're realizing that it can be done. You're realizing, no, this can actually work. And so it's no regrets. I like being in this situation. I like being in a situation where you burn the bridges and then it forces you to find another way. And so I'm gonna find it.
Excellent.
Put it this way: if you come back to me next year and I've not figured all this out, I will be shocked and I will apologize for everything.
So you've kind of already addressed this a bit, but I want to make an explicit question. You stated that one of the reasons for making this change was to free up time and produce more content. And at least from a public perspective, that hasn't really happened yet.
That has not happened yet, correct.
Yeah, the level's about the same as what it was.
No. Massive. I've produced. If you're just looking at what's happened recently, no, I'm producing less content than I used to, because back in the day during stretches where they weren't messing with me, the goal was always a video a day. Sometimes I would make 2 videos per day. I could never keep that up for terribly long, but I could do it for about a month. There were situations where I would be able to do it for about a month, video every day. And then, you miss a day here or there or something like that. So I definitely haven't been doing anywhere near that, but it's a couple of things. It's one, if I'm no longer dedicating time to, arguing with YouTube over things. 2, if I don't have to deal with because keep in mind, if it takes me a week to get them to restore a video, I'm banned for that week. So I can't post content for that week. If I don't have to deal with that anymore, where, okay, you've just given me a fake strike over here, but I'm not banned on this other channel, so I can post over here. The situation is such to where I can be far more consistent right now. But as far as the idea about putting out more content, I'll go ahead and tell you. No one else knows this, Thaddeus. You're getting the inside information here. Back, the original plan was, so one, I don't want to have to deal with stupid fake strikes and morons anymore. I don't want to have to deal with that because it's a massive waste of time. So didn't want to deal with that. But back then I said I would like to just hire someone, because when I'm making videos, probably half the time of making videos is stuff that I would only trust myself with. I'm not going to trust anyone else writing my content. Make your own content. But stuff like editing or making graphics or something like that, someone else could be doing. So the theory is, if roughly half of the time I spend making a video could be done by someone else, I'd be better off hiring someone to do that, and then I could put out twice as much content. So I actually had people like sending me applications and so on, and didn't find it was always someone could do one thing or two things out of like the 5 or 6 things that I really want people to that I really need someone to do to cover everything. Um, in other words, to free up as much time as possible. But so I started getting, looking through applications and so on. I was like, it's not a perfect fit. But anyway, so I was thinking it would actually be better off to just find someone who has some natural ability and train them to do everything I need them to do, rather than find someone who does all this stuff, right? Because I mean, keep in mind, no one works with me, so it's kind of a weird idea to say, oh, here's someone who's just going to jump in here and be doing half the stuff I do. Anyway, my old friend Randy is up for parole.
Ooh,
Is
nice.
up for parole in 10 days. So it was just a situation of, before I sign anyone else, right? Because a lot of people are like, hey, David, I live in Canada, but I'd be happy to come, move to come work with you every day and film your videos and stuff like that. I don't want to have someone make that kind of move if if I could like hire Randy, because he's going to need a job once he for those of you guys who don't know, Randy was my buddy from jail all those years ago. I had 1 felony. He had 21 felonies. And so he's been locked up. He's been locked up ever since. But anyway, he's going up for parole. He's got a pretty good shot now. But if possible, that Randy, insanely intelligent and good artist. He can draw something and make it look like a picture. So I'm thinking he'd probably be good at like graphic design and things like that. And so it's mainly holding off. It's mainly, let's see how that parole hearing goes. If he gets out, I'm just going to train him. If I need to send him to school to learn videography and stuff like that, I'll do it. But I know it's a guy I trust. It's a guy I get along with. It's a guy who's really intelligent, who has all the natural ability. He would just have to learn the specific programs and things like that. But again, super, super smart. So I'm waiting on him. And if he gets parole, I'm going to hire Randy, train him to do everything. If he doesn't, then I'm gonna get someone else to do it. But yeah, so anyway,
That's really awesome. Good to hear that you're still in touch with Randy. You kind of undersold him there a bit. You said he had 21 felonies. What you didn't mention is that he had those because he converted to Christianity and turned himself in, and then he's the one that made you start considering Christianity.
Yep. So, and I've already notified the parole board. I wrote them a letter, and I'm actually going to speak at his parole hearing. But I've already sent them a letter saying I can actually give this guy, because that matters to them. Like, what are you going to do? You've been locked up for a long time. What are you going to do when you get out? It actually matters if, you've got a job waiting on you when you get out. So I've already notified them. Hey, I can hire this man as soon as he gets out.
Definitely. So one of the things you stated that you wanted to do was what you called the apologetic empire, where you make 50-part video series and have it translated. One of my Patreons is one of the people who signed up to do that, and he was wanting an update on the status of the project.
Yeah, I actually, so for that, I mean, I could release the scripts whenever I want. So I wrote all the scripts. And that's a lot of stuff. I've actually been working on those for years, because I did part of those back in the day, making videos and so on. But as far as putting together, these scripts, because now you have to have a script. It's not like you could just make a video. You need a script because it's supposed to be translated and then re-recorded in other languages. So here's a situation where every video has to be accompanied by a script. You take the script and then translate it into another language and then re-record it. So I actually prepared the scripts and was going to have these recorded in a studio. It's a Christian video studio in Tennessee. We had it all set up, going to go out there, record on such and such day. and was going to fly out there. Then we're going to spend a couple days recording. Then I was going to head back. Made it to Charlotte for a layover, and in Charlotte, they said your flight is canceled, and there's no available flight for the next 2 days. So I was actually heading out there to do that. And it was a bad situation, because it's a situation where the airlines actually say, we cannot get you. We cannot get you to this city for the next 2 days. And no one else. You can't go to another airline. There is no possible way to get there in the next 2 days. But it's like, wait, those are the 2 days we're supposed to be recording. And so it was just a situation where, gosh, it sucks, because these guys set up their studio to record this. They do custom sets for everyone who's recording. So they set all this up, and then I couldn't even make it out there. And that was the third time in a row that it happened. That was the worst of it. But that was the third flight in a row where I'm assuming that airlines after COVID just had to have less flights and so on. And so therefore they need to be more packed. And because I'm sure, back in the day, your flight gets canceled, no problem. They put you on the next one or the one after that or something like that. You still get through. Now it's this weird situation where, there are 10 flights going in there, but you can't get on any of them because they're all packed, and there's a wait list of 18 people on each one. So that would be one thing to try and go out there and do it again very quickly behind there. But we're just in a situation where I'm the night nurse at home now. Meaning, I'm sure most people know, but we have 2 disabled sons, and so when things are going really well, we have a nurse during the day and a nurse during the night, and but we don't always have a nurse at night. Now we only have a nurse at night like 2 days a week. But the situation is I can't. It's hard to run out and go do stuff, because that makes things difficult for my wife. So I kind of don't want to set up and go do it and mess things up for the studio and so on. It's almost like I don't want to do it until I can drive there, to where I don't have to rely on the airlines. You know what I mean? Because it's ordinarily, if it's just me traveling somewhere and I get delayed, okay, it's not the end of the world. But when it involves a bunch of other people, okay, I just made things, now my wife had to stay up all night, even though she was up all day, so that I can go record, and it doesn't work. And I'm messing things up for these guys. It's I don't know. It's just a situation where I'm like, okay, let's get the nursing situation figured out, and then I'll worry about going and recording those 50 videos. So that's kind of the situation there. So notice everything. It's never, this isn't getting done. It's always just delays.
Yeah, I know how that works. People who are not in producing content, they might not understand, but I know how that works.
For some reason, the delays, they really like me. They really like to come after me.
So kind of related to them, but a bit different. From running the David Wood archives, I have a bunch of people who have volunteered to translate your old videos. I upload the English subtitles, and then they provide translated ones. Would you be interested in having them do that for your new channels as well?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. With that said, always keep in mind, anyone's free to do anything they want with my videos. So if someone's really interested in translate, I'm saying this because it might be more effective. People can add subtitles in a different language, and that is actually cool, because then people who don't speak that language can still watch the video. It may be more effective to have just a separate channel. In other words, instead of having the YouTube subtitles that you enter in, just take a video, add subtitles in an editing program, and then have them on your own channel for that language. So I don't know. I don't actually know what is better. I would assume that the second one's better, because then anyone who goes on that channel is getting stuff in that language. But yeah, no, I'd have to think about it. But again, anyone can do anything they want with my videos. I'm fine.
Yeah, that's a fair point. One of the other things I do, because I'm very nerdy and I'm a data analyst, is I keep track of how many subscribers channel have. I don't do it manually. I have a script that pulls it up for me. But one of the channels that's growing pretty quickly is called David Wood in Francais, and he dubs them. He dubs your videos into French, and there seems to be a good audience for that. So if someone's willing to dub your videos, I think that would have even bigger impact, because someone watching the video, they don't necessarily want to be reading words. They might want to hear it spoken in their language. So anyone out there who speaks in our language, I would encourage you to do that.
Yeah. So dubs, that would my I can't prove this because I don't know, but I would assume that something that's actually spoken in the other language do better than reading subtitles. With that said, the ideal scenario would be actually like translating it and re-recording it as yourself. You know what I mean? Because then you've got an actual video. It's not me on the screen and you dubbing it. It's actually you speaking. So keep in mind, people are free to do that as well. You're free to, if I make an 8-minute video, you are free to translate the entire video and to just re-record it as yourself speaking. You do not need to give me any credit. I do not care. I think it's hilarious when I'm watching someone else and they obviously copied an argument from me. It's totally cool. And it's cool because now people can't dismiss it by saying, oh, that's the Islamophobe David Wood. They'd have to deal with you. So anyway, anyone who wants to make a channel in another language and you've got some good translation abilities, one way to do it is to find some people I think there are probably several Christian apologists who would not care if you translated their content, re-recorded it as you in your own language, and it's just you on your channel speaking. There are plenty of us who are totally fine with that.
Yeah, I would imagine most would be fine with that. A super chat from Time is Fleeting. David's review of Richard Carrier's atheist book is hilarious. I have a soft spot for Rich too. Does the witty neighborhood philosopher do any more writing on the side? He's a good writer. So any plans to do any writing?
Yeah, I've had too many people for too many years bothering me about writing books. I don't mean individuals. I mean publishing companies bothering me about, hey, David, when are you going to get that book out? So yeah, I will eventually sit down and do that. And by the way, I've written massive I've completed one book, but Nabil told me, no, publish other stuff before you publish that, because if you have other stuff that'll be more popular, then that will be better off. But I don't know if anyone knows what he's talking about here, but this was way back in the day. I think that was before YouTube. Richard Carrier made a book called Sense and Goodness Without God. So I wrote like 100-page response called Good and Senseless Without God. And I didn't even know I was being hilarious and brutal in it, but then Richard wrote like 100-page response to me. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know what he was specifically referring to, so I imagine most people.
I don't even know where that is anymore. Like, because that was on a different website that we had way back in the day, so I don't even know where that is right now.
Well, but apparently it's still out there, because
I did write a brutal response to Carrier, and then it was funny because I mean the dude is just such a narcissist. He had this part in an article for infidels.org where he was saying that he's greater than Aristotle, right? And he's like, I excel them in every way, blah blah blah. And so I did this. Like, wait, so Aristotle, the guy who invented the field of logic, the guy who invented biology, the guy who spent 20 years with Plato before launching his own. And so I made just a list of their qualifications on each side, and like how this guy was so delusional that he thought he's greater than Aristotle. But I don't know that. But anyway, for me, it was like a connection. It's like all you guys are like narcissists, egomaniacs, and so on. You're the guys who are leading the war against God, and I don't think it's a coincidence that you guys are like these, egomaniacs who think that you're greater than Aristotle.
Yeah, especially coming from Richard Carrier, the guy who denies that Jesus was a historical figure. Yeah, a little delusional there. He did Time is Fleeting did confirm that he read it recently, so apparently it's out there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I mean, he had such stupid arguments in there. So one, I called it the argument from blue butt monkeys or something like that. But he said, it's like, the fact that there are no monkeys flying out of my butt proves that there are no such creatures. I was like, no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. What are you talking about? He had this other argument where he said it was his argument from big breasts, right? Some women have big breasts and it eventually gives them back problems. So if there was a God, there wouldn't be big breasts that could give women back problems. Like, are you serious? This is the guy who's greater than Aristotle, right? So anyway, I pointed out based on a comment from my wife, because as soon as I said that to my wife, she goes, some men would look at the same evidence and come to the exact opposite conclusion. I was like, yeah, so I stole that.
That's pretty hilarious. So, almost done with your own plans here. Before you ended up gifting the channel to Hatun, you came up with this brilliant idea live in the air of making a super group. And I have a little tiny clip, 5-10 seconds to remind you of that. Let me pull that up.
By you, though, so we will. I do like the idea of a super group run by you, though, so we will tentatively stick with that.
So you said that you liked the idea of a super group.
Mm-hmm.
And before you even said that, I had written in my own long-term vision statement that I wanted to organize and unite the apologetics community. And you said something similar about your own desires. So my question for you is, if I were to move forward and create a new super group channel, obviously the Old Act 17 channel is owned by Hatun and she has her own plans for that. But if I create a brand new channel, my plan would be to pick one topic each month, have all the people who are picked for it contribute one video on that topic. So the commitment would be one video a month. Would you be interested in participating in that?
Maybe in trying it out. I'm not convinced that it will work. And the reason is YouTube is pretty, let's say, person-centered in that people watch a video based on liking a person rather than watching based on liking a kind of content. In other words, on my channel, I over the years posted multiple videos with Anthony Rogers in the video, or with Colin from Islam Critiqued on my channel. I would inevitably get people unsubscribing based on me posting the videos. I would do it anyway because these guys are both posting very similar content to what I'm posting and trying to help give them exposure, and it would. It would. So in other words, it would help them. But there were always this group, I clicked on this video and it's not what I was looking for. It's not the person I was looking for. And so there is this, keep in mind, it's not, people have a problem with any sort of change. I would move something on my shelf and I would get, hey, why did you move that? What kind of signal are you trying to send? Well, apparently there are people who just don't change anything, right? So the idea is, if people are subscribing based on the person that they like, and you're going to have, let's say, 10 different people on a channel, all you can do is try it and see if it works, because you might just get the people who are interested in that topic and aren't focused on a specific person. And it may work, or it may not work at all. People are like, every time I click on this stupid channel, I get a different person. I don't like that.
No, that's completely fair. I'm very into the analytics, and I could definitely see that it might not work.
Yeah. I'm all for. I'm all for it. Trying something and seeing if it doesn't work. I do that all the time. I do that all the time. Here, I'm going to do this, and it doesn't work. Okay. I tried, and it didn't work. So now try something else, and eventually you figure out something. You figure out something that works. But again, notice Anthony and Colin, both very, very similar content. Some people just, hey, it's a different person. I don't like it. That's so I don't know, weird to me, because I mean, it would seem to me, obviously, if you like David Wood, you'd like Anthony Rogers. If you like David Wood, you'd like Colin. But some people just, again, they're the people who, you moved a book. Something's different here. So yeah, again, all you can do is try it, because that's the question. So there are unquestionably people who subscribe to a channel or watch a channel because they like that person. Those are the kinds of viewers that would not do well with a super group channel. But there are other people who are just interested in the topic and might actually like getting multiple different people's views on that topic. So I don't know. You could try it and see what happens.
Yeah, and USO saw reveal. I'm not quite sure what the name is.
UFOs
UFOs are real. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Well, keep in mind, for everyone who has a problem, UFO is just an unidentified flying object, something in the sky, and you don't know what it is. So yes, in that sense, UFOs are definitely real.
Anyway, he says that he likes it when you team up with Mike Winger, Inspiring Philosophy, What Do You Mean, etc.
That's what I do too, right? So, but there are some weird people in the world. I can make a video.
Yeah,
I can make a video right now with Mike Winger, and I'll get a bunch of complaints. When you only clicked on that guy, we got this other person. What?
Yeah, I was friends with Colin from before you featured him, and when you'd put up his videos and it had his face in it, they'd get way less views. But if you put up a generic thumbnail that didn't have his face in it, then they would get the normal amount of views, and there'd be lots of comments like, "David looks so different now."
Yeah, and it's. I mean, notice I was posting those videos because it was really good content. It was the same kind of content I was making. So you'd think, oh, okay, what do you actually care? I mean, you would think, hey, wait a minute, Colin's a way better looking guy than David. So like, wouldn't you rather have the same content and a much better looking guy? Like, no, he doesn't look like David. What the heck is wrong with you guys, man?
Islam Mertada El Verdad said something similar, that there are people who love those type of videos, and said that she loves some of my collaborations. So yeah, I think that that's fair, that there's both people who like it and people who don't like it. So actually that might be better if it's starting as a brand new channel. Maybe you only get people who like it. I don't know. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Anyway, I'll put David down as try it out on that one.
That's my motto. Try it and see what happens.
So last question about yourself before we switch to talking a little bit more generally. What do you think is the most underrated video you've ever made? Or put differently, is there a video that you're particularly disappointed with how it performed?
Usually, I mean, that's happened several times, but after you figure out how things work, you realize what the issues are. But it's happened multiple times where you spend a lot of time making a video, because notice this happened both ways. Sometimes you'll spend almost no time making a video and then it blows up. And you're like, why did that video blow up? Like my video, three Quran verses every Christian should know. I mean, I spent all of 2 hours on that video, and it got well over 1 million views. And I was like, how did that happen? I mean, I put it together as I was riding a train home. I got together. I just jotted some notes down, got home, recorded it, posted it. And then other videos, you'll be working on them for days or weeks, and they don't go anywhere. But I mean, one video that I really worked on a lot and I thought was going to blow up because it was called the Sheepgate conspiracy. But there are videos like that where the information was really, really important and just demolished a lot of false information. And so you think, okay, well, that one should do better than this other video that I worked 2 hours on. But then it just doesn't, maybe it gets like 50 or 60,000 or something like that. But normally in those situations, you find out later it's title and thumbnail. If you have really awesome content and it doesn't do well, you should change your title and thumbnail. And so for that one, should have just titled it something else. In other words, once I saw it wasn't doing as well as I thought it should, I should have gone back and said, okay, how can I How can I change the title? How can I modify the thumbnail or something like that?
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I think you're right, because Sheepgate controversy, no one will know what that's about,
Yeah.
right?
And
But if you title it something like
yeah,
how Muhammad's wife changed the
Muhammad's
Quran,
wife changed the Quran. Yeah.
yeah,
But and notice you start seeing the issue of like titles and thumbnails, because there have also been times where I've posted a video and it would get like 50 or 60,000 views. But then, since I've always allowed people to repost my content, someone else would repost it on their channel and they would give it a title like David Wood destroys Muslim woman or something like, and it would get over 1 million views. And it's like, there's a part of you that goes, dang, that's my video and you got 1 million views. But there's another part that says, okay, whatever else happens, here's how many it got on this dude got an extra 1 million views on my video that I wasn't getting. So that's good. And that's part of the reason why I always say it. It's like, you're always, my video took off on that other person's channel, but what the heck, if it wasn't going to, it's still cool that it took off on your channel and it got a ton of extra views. So yeah, but anyway, the point is that happens a lot of time. You make a video, some videos you make and they're going to do well. You're like, oh, I just made some YouTube gold with that video, because that video has really awesome content, awesome title, awesome thumbnail, and then it blows up. And other videos you make and you think they're not going anywhere and they blow up, and other videos you make you think they're going to blow up and they don't do anything. And so anyway, it's just, and it's because there are other things involved other than you, right? There are the people who are watching and their reaction to stuff. There's the algorithm, there's all kinds of stuff involved, where in other words, a bunch of other things get a vote in how well your video does, right? Other people, whether people like your title, whether people like your thumbnail, whether people click, whether people, how long people watch it once they've clicked. The algorithm, which you don't control, who is it recommending your video to? There are all these other factors beyond yourself that get a vote in how well a video is going to do. So it's not just you. So that's why it's kind of unpredictable.
Yeah, I mean, very much to your point that we don't want to just pursue the videos that get the most views necessarily. I mean, I think that you could easily do those. I've done a number of videos on the scientific miracle claims, and those are always underperform. I know now if I make one, it's going to underperform, and it's because Christians just aren't very interested in it. But I think it's actually super important, because it's very important to Muslims, so I do them anyway.
You are correct. Sometimes you and you could even have an entire channel like that, where you could say, hey, I know this is a really niche channel with only like 5,000 people who are interested in this, but I still need to do it anyway, because that's it. This is important stuff to 5,000 people. And so it might be a situation where it's never going to blow up. You're never going to get 1 million views or 500,000 or even 20,000 views on a video. You still might want to do it, because, those 5,000 people matter too.
Exactly. And Rockstar has a suggestion for someone out there of making a shorts channel out of David's content. And it's one of the things I wanted to eventually do on the archives, but there's only so much time. There's only so much time. So if someone else wants to take it and they want to start posting David's content in short form, you would definitely get views.
That is a situation where it's one of the things I wanted to hire someone for. In other words, if I hire someone to help me make content, I really I may be the worst on the planet as far as learning a new program or learning how to use something new. I mean, it could be anything. When Mac comes up with some new update for iMovie or something like this, I want to like go on a killing spree. It's like, I have to learn something new. And notice that will just be a slight modification of how to use something. But yeah, when Microsoft Word or something like that comes up with an update and they change the the menus and stuff like that, totally enraged. So learning something like doing shorts, it's probably not as hard as I think, but in my head, I'm like, okay, I can't make those on iMovie or in Final Cut, cut them down to that. So it's got to be a different program, and I'm going to have to use a different program. And I really cannot emphasize how much I hate learning any new program. So anyway, it's a situation where what I would really like is someone sits down and says, okay, David, you have to speak for 59 seconds. I'm going to record it. And then someone else does everything. Okay, I could give you 59 seconds worth of content. I give you 59 seconds worth of content, no problem. And then someone else does the rest. But no, that is one of the things. That is one of the things that is really that I have not used, that I should be using. Because notice, if you make, let's say, a 55-second video that is then a YouTube short, you can multitask that video, because you can use that same format on Instagram. You can use that same format on TikTok or whatever. And so, and as this person, as a Rockstar there pointed out, I've seen people where they make their video and their video gets 20,000 views, but their short version of it, which is just a clip from that video, then gets 1.5 million or something like that. So got to do it. And keep in mind, that's not just what people like. YouTube has been emphasizing shorts. YouTube keeps throwing shorts in everyone's faces.
Yep, and proper monetization for those is coming in January or February. So that's not by any means the most important thing, but keep that in mind as well. Elle says, your brother in Christ would love to make David's videos into shorts. Elle, get in contact with me or have your husband do so, and either start another channel for David Shorts, or I can give you access to upload them on the archives, whatever you want to do.
Derek wants my shorts.
Yes. We should definitely title that.
Where's my shorts, Derek?
All right, so switching gears a little bit. We're going to talk now about where you see the world heading in the coming years. And by that, I mean where you see Christianity and Islam heading.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, there was around 2015, Pew released this survey. They release it every year, but for whatever reason that year, they decided to project the trends forward. And we still get Muslims coming and telling us today how Islam is going to pass Christianity as the world's largest religion. And Pew projected around 2070 if trends held. So let's ignore the stupidity of projecting the trends so far in advance. Where do you think that the world is heading? Do you think Islam is going to continue to gain in percentage terms, or do you think it's going to reach a plateau and then begin to fall off?
It's kind of hard to predict. I mean, you can make projections. I mean, Pew did their projections based on birth rates. And it's interesting because Muslims will look at the title and then they'll run around, it's growing so fast, it must be true. When Pew actually says this is based primarily on birth rates, that Muslims, wherever you go, have higher birth rates. And I posted videos in the past going through why they have the highest birth rates. And it's got a lot to do with Islam's impact on women, just turning them into baby making machines instead of, there's less emphasis on, girls being educated and getting a career or anything else like that. And so, girls are, by the time a woman in the West has her first kid at age 28, woman in the Muslim world is on her 10th kid. I mean, so it's hard not to blow up a population like that. With that said, you do have the avalanche of apostasy going on. And so the question is, at what point will that be enough to completely offset the higher birth rates? Also, as countries modernize, birth rates tend to drop, and so as Muslim countries modernize and so on, the birth rates will drop. But I mean, I would say, I can't say for certain, but it looks like the avalanche of apostasy is accelerating, right? I mean, we've talked about this before on various streams and so on, but back when Nabil became a Christian, it was rare. It was rare to hear from an ex-Muslim. There were ex-Muslims out there. There were not a lot of them, and they weren't very public. Now, I mean, everywhere. Every time I go online, I run into 50 ex-Muslims. So notice that was It's like with YouTube. I say, okay, YouTube's gotten worse every year. Where's it going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do I want to be still in this system, or do I want to modify things so that, things aren't as bad 5 or 10 years from now? So you don't just look at where you are and how bad things have gotten where you are. You look at where things are heading. And so if you're like, wait a minute, in 2005, the apostasy rate for young Muslims might have been like, I don't know, 1% or something like that. And now, I mean, it was like 2019 or 2020 where Muslims were saying the apostasy rate was 20 or 24 or 25%. And so it's probably even worse right now for them. And so you're looking at it and say, okay, back then it was like 1%. Now it's 25% or more now. What's it going to be like several years from now? Well, it's kind of hard to predict because Islam could always change. But what do you do when you have no arguments? I mean, what do you do when you have no arguments or no evidence, and people are catching on to the fact that the dialogists are compulsive liars? What do you do? Well, notice the reason it's hard is because, like, part of why Andrew Tate converted is Islam won't allow this stuff. Islam will crush you. So Islam does have ways of pressuring people into, with death penalties for apostasy and so on. They have ways of keeping people in the fold of Islam. So I can see it going in a bunch of ways. I can see, the avalanche of apostasy continuing to where they can't punish people for apostasy, and to where it becomes normal, or where it even becomes a cool thing to do in the Muslim community. Like, it becomes cool to rebel against Islam. In that case, Islam could collapse very, very rapidly. Or you could see it where Muslim nations become more strict and crack down even more and go on killing sprees to stop apostates and so on, and keeps multiplying that way. And so it could go in multiple directions. If I had to wager on one, I think the avalanche of apostasy is going to keep growing and that Islam's going to collapse. And I don't think it's going to happen in 2070. I think it's going to happen much, much sooner than that at the rate it's accelerating. So it's basically, I mean, Pew Research was doing it's okay, based on the way things are now, if this continues, here's where Islam is at in 2070. Notice we're doing something similar. If this avalanche of apostasy, if the apostasy keeps accelerating at the rate it's accelerating right now, Islam collapses. Could something change that derails the way things are going? Yes, it could happen, according to the way Pew is doing it. That happens anytime you're projecting into making projections about the future. But yeah, looking at the way things are now, and unless something weird happens or something changes rapidly, Islam's gonna collapse.
Yeah, I would agree. Related, Knife says the people who leave Christianity is way more than the people who leave Islam, which is a perfect segue into my question for you. Is Christianity actually on the decline? We hear these stories about it all the time, but is it actually on the decline?
No. And the people who talk about that, they're talking about like Western nations. That's what they're talking about. That you can look at statistics, and the number of people who consider themselves Christians 20 years ago and so on is different. It's lower now. So in Western nations, the number of people who consider themselves Christians as opposed to non-religious has been dropping. And that's based on a ton of factors. But I mean, you look at other places and Christianity is exploding in the world, right? I mean, Christianity's been blowing up in China for a long time. Christianity's been blowing up in Africa for a long time. In Korea, you could just look at the numbers. It's skyrocketing now. But I do want to be careful there, much more careful than a lot of Christians are. A lot of Christians look at this and go, Christianity's collapsing in the West, but it's blowing up over there, so we're good to go. No, the entire world is going to have to go through what the West is going through. Not in all the same ways. People could learn lessons from the West and not want to go down the same road. But one of the issues that you have is with the rise of technology and mass media and so on, all of a sudden people are bombarded with a lot of different options that they didn't have in the past, right? I mean, it used to be Muslims over here, Christians over here, everywhere. Everyone you're going to be around is going to be a Christian over here. Everyone you're going to be around is a Muslim over here. And so a lot of people aren't going to question things. All of a sudden you get to our age and people are bombarded with, there are a ton of different things. There are a ton of different things out there. And so people have a lot of options that they didn't have before. And in the West, you don't get killed for leaving Christianity. Your parents generally aren't going. There could be individual parents who turn their backs on their kids and so on, but it's certainly far less frequent than it is in Islam. I've known tons of ex-Muslims who said, they converted and, their parents never wanted to talk to them again, or they said their parents said something like, "Do not come back here unless you're a Muslim," and they say that was the last time I saw my father, something like that. So massive pressure put on Muslims to stay in Islam, and if you don't have the same kind of pressures on Western Christians, you're not gonna have the same results. With that said, I mean, there are positive things. Like there was one, I think it was Harvard, they did a study that the overall number of people who were calling themselves Christians, that was declining. That's been declining for a while. But the number of people who would be classified in the extremely devout category, that was actually rising. So it's fewer people, but people are more take it more seriously and so on. So anyway, it's just insanely stupid to say, here's this one part of the world where people are being bombarded with other ideas, and where people's attention, because things did so well over here that now everyone carries around a phone, and where kids are sitting around on TikTok all day, and so they're growing up and they're not taking Christianity seriously, and then by the time they get to college they've rejected it, and oh look, that's what's happened over here. In the Muslim world, they'll kill you or somehow punish you for apostasy, and Islam is really retaining its believers better, therefore Christianity is going to collapse and Islam is going to succeed. It doesn't work like that. Again, what I pointed out earlier, what's happening in the West, that's going to happen everywhere. So don't get your hopes on, Christianity is going to take over in this other country. That other country is eventually going to have to go through the same thing. In other words, massive influence by social media and all these other factors. And I don't know, you're just going to have to kind of wait and see what happens, because what I'm seeing is, I view it as like a massive failure of an argument. The argument that we're being presented with over the past several decades from like the atheists and so on is, if we just renounce all this religion stuff, we'll become more rational. That's what we need to do to be more rational. And you look and wait a minute, you're all going insane. All of civilization is going, like, now you can't figure out what a girl is anymore. You can't even define it. You won't even say it. You won't even say it anymore because you get eaten alive if you simply say it. And it's like, okay, this can't go on for too long, right? Eventually people have to say, okay, this did not go the way we thought, right? And so it's like an argument. You've made a claim. Society will become more rational by abandoning these things. And wait a minute, society breaks apart when you abandon it. And so I don't know. You always get the you have a dominant position, you get a reaction against it, and people want to go in a different direction, but then you get a reaction to that reaction. So I would just say, stop thinking that Christianity stands or falls with the percentage of Christians in the United States or Great Britain or something like that. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I mean, you made a number of good points there. I just want to add a couple things real quickly. I think that the decline of Christianity in Europe specifically, I think kind of actually points to what's going to happen in Islam, because the reason Christianity started to decline in Europe, and the United States is a special case, it's different than the rest of the West, but in Europe is because of the academic criticism that was coming out in the 19th century. And the church didn't have any replies. They didn't have any response to these things. People are discovering new things. They're refining things like the Gospel of Thomas, and it was causing people doubts. And now we're just starting to see that for Islam. We're just starting to see the academic criticism of Islam taking place. And we live in a very different time now. We live in a time where information will spread much quicker, much more rapidly. And Christianity now has answers. We now have raised up good answers. And you kind of see often in debates between atheists and Christians that the Christian's on the higher ground and the atheist is making arguments that are not logically valid. They're making emotional arguments. And the main argument that atheists make today is that Christianity causes violence, or it causes hatred, or it causes evil, something like that, which is just flat out false. And it's an emotional argument. It has nothing to do with truth. So,
by the way, notice because G.K. Chesterton said, if you're being attacked on both sides for completely opposite reasons, you're probably right, and they're at extremes. So notice on one side, Christianity is too violent and oppressive. That's, the atheist side. And on the other side, the Muslims are looking at it, it's like the Andrew Tate style. Christianity is too weak and you don't crush everyone who disagrees with you. It's like, wait a minute, which one is it? Are we too harsh? Are we too harsh and oppressive? Or are we too weak and soft? Which one is it? And yeah, it looks like, no, you guys are at extremes. And obviously Christians aren't doing everything right or something, but we're right for not going on killing sprees over this stuff. But again, notice the situation where, because you pointed this out, and I mentioned that everyone's going to have to go through this. It's for centuries Christianity has been criticized, and especially in the in the 20th century and so on. Christians have been bombarded with claims that their religion is false, and Christians, people have always been going through arguments for and against Christianity. I mean, you go back, it doesn't matter how far you go back to Thomas Aquinas, you go all the way back to Augustine, you go all the way back to the time of the New Testament. People are criticizing the claims and Christians are responding to the claims. This certainly picked up the pace in academia and so on, attacking the claims of Christianity. But notice, Islam just got started with that. In other words, for 14 centuries of Islam in the Muslim world, you're not going to criticize Islam. You're going to get your head chopped off. All of a sudden, the moment we start being able to respond to some of the claims, they get the avalanche of apostasy. And they're sitting here bragging, but it's faster in Christian. Yeah, Christians have been dealing with it for a lot longer. You're just starting to deal with it, and it's collapsing. You just started. This has been going on. You're talking about the last decade, where people could get criticisms of the arguments for Islam online, since they won't encounter them in society. And you're already dealing with it, like 25% apostasy rate for young Muslims. What do you think? What do you think it's like when you've gone through it for 2 decades, let alone 2 centuries?
Yeah, absolutely. The other point I wanted to make is along the lines of what you made, is that while the number of nominal Christians has declined, it's an open question whether people have actually lost belief or whether they're just more open about belief they never had before. And you can look at things like regular church attendance, and it doesn't really seem to have declined. It seems to be pretty similar to the rate it's always been. There's just much less people who culturally identify as Christians. And I'm not saying that those people didn't believe it in some sense, but they weren't highly devoted to it. So it's an open question whether Christianity has actually even declined, even in the West, and globally, as you pointed out, it's doing just fine.
Yeah, there's 2 other issues there and all that. One, Christians shouldn't be obsessed with being like the dominant world religion. So right now, Christianity is the biggest religion in the world. Notice we don't run around thumping our chests about that like Muslims. Islam's the fastest growing religion because of birth rates, right? We're not obsessed with that. But notice it's not built into Christianity that we have to control the world and be dominant over everyone. I mean, if we became dominant and took over the world, that would be a bigger problem for Christianity. Because wait a minute, we're supposed to be persecuted and we're supposed to be persecuted and so on, and then Jesus returns and fixes things. It's Islam where you get this picture of Islam's just going to keep growing and it's going to take over the world and dominate everything. So Islam starting to collapse, that's a problem for Islam. If people turn against Christianity and start attacking Christians and Christianity starts shrinking, that makes perfect sense from a biblical perspective. So it's not something that should be now because a bunch of kids watching TikTok are no longer believing in Christianity. Oh, my faith is in shambles. You got problems. So that's one issue. And then there was one more. There was one more point. Oh yeah, I actually view it as positive. Like there's a transition here. Not positive as far as people leaving Christianity, but positive in the sense of the reason that Christians sort of lost the ability over time most Christians to respond effectively to criticisms was that Christianity was just dominant, right? So in other words, in the first century of Christianity, you weren't becoming, and for the second and third, you weren't becoming a Christian unless you knew why you believed, right? So you're going to believe this thing and you're going to get persecuted for it, and the Romans aren't going to like you, and the Romans are coming after you, and so why are you going to want to convert to this unless it's because you've seen some reason to believe that it's true? And so people were converting to Christianity because they had reasons to believe it was true. In other words, apologetics was already built into your conversion. If you were to come up to someone who, after he's converted, and say, hey, why did you convert? That person would be able to give you an answer of why he's a Christian. Meanwhile, Christianity spread until the point where, if you go to the West, everyone's a Christian. So what do you need apologetics for? What do you need to be able to give a reason for? You don't. And so you just grow up and you're a Christian and you go to church and you're never given a reason to become a Christian. All of a sudden people start blasting away and you don't have any arguments. You never needed them before. And so that became like the main position of the church, is not needing arguments. Well, guess what? Now you're going through a bunch of stuff, and it's going to force people to learn why they're actually Christians. But once the people who are Christian remain Christian because they've realized why they're a Christian, then you end up with a population of Christians, even though it may be smaller, even though it may not be 99% of the population anymore. Now it may be 15 or 20%. But if that's a community that knows why they believe, and that's the community that then goes out and evangelizing people, well, now you're in a different situation. Now apologetics and giving arguments will actually be built into the system again, as it was in the early centuries when it kept exploding.
Absolutely. I agree completely that the decline in numbers, even if it's real, is not important. Truth isn't based on numbers. And I'd much rather have Christians who are devoted to their faith than casual Christians anyway. So I have a super chat from Resurrecting Truth. Thaddeus and David are my favorites. God bless you all. If Muhammad were alive, he would have 100 Instagram accounts to look at women. Hire me. I would gladly destroy Muhammad for free with a smile on my face by uploading David's shorts. And then she just made
why can't they come up with a different name for shorts, right? Because in my mind, every time I hear David's shorts, I'm thinking, okay, my shorts, what? Like my boxer shorts? Now you're getting gross.
And then she made a comment just now. Islam have more secret apostates than Christianity. They live in fear, which, well, first of all, everyone should check out Resurrecting Truth's channel. She's an ex-Muslim who just recently started making YouTube content. She's doing some great stuff there. But my question for you, David, is, do you think this might be what happened in Christianity, where, in a short period of time, a large people stopped identifying as Christian, probably because they weren't really Christian in the first place, but it wasn't culturally acceptable to say that they're not Christian. You think something similar might happen in Islam, where one day, not literally a day, of course, but in a short period of time, all of a sudden it'll look like 30% of the population apostatized overnight because they'll realize, hey, there's enough of us. We can be open about our non-belief.
Yeah, that's kind of why, what happens in Iran matters, that like the rest of the world is watching. Can you pull it off? Because here's what you actually need. And what I think will happen in the near future. Right now, you still have in various Muslim countries some pretty harsh penalties for apostasy. If you get enough if you get enough secret apostates, enough people who won't announce that they're apostates because they don't want to be punished by the government, they don't want to be cast out by their families and so on. If you get enough of them, then in a situation where it won't take much to set it off, right? It's like the situation where the woman in Iran got killed by police after not wearing her hijab appropriately. She gets taken into custody and gets killed. That sort of ignites everyone else who was already thinking we have a problem with it, but they didn't have something to rally around. And so what you'll end up with is, in a place like Saudi Arabia or something like that, you'll have some apostate is sentenced to death or something like that, or lashes or imprisonment or something like that. And you'll eventually, if you eventually have enough apostates there, they'll kind of rise up and be like, you can't kill us all. You know, we're 10% of the population now, or we're 15% of the population. Because keep in mind, it's Muslims who are saying that they think 5% of the population in Muslim countries are now closet atheists. That didn't come from us. That came from Muslims, right? So notice 5%. Well, that's still pretty low. But yeah, keep in mind, 15 years ago it would have been 0%. Now you're talking about 5%. You're talking about millions of ex-Muslims who are atheists now in Muslim countries. So what you'll see is something will happen, and then you'll have this kind of, this uprising of ex-Muslims saying, you can't kill us all. You're not going to put 5 million of us to death. And there'll be pressure put on the government, because now the entire world will be watching, and the entire world won't just say, okay, it's okay if you go kill all these people. And what will happen is the Muslim country, which still wants to get along and have relations with the rest of the world, will have to modify their rules, do away with their apostasy laws and so on. And all of a sudden, as soon as you're not killing them or punishing them for it, it's the avalanche, let's say, is going to accelerate there. But yes, this is all stuff that can happen very, very quickly. Again, I mean, you're talking just in the amount of time that I've been doing this, we've gone from occasionally seeing one ex-Muslim, very, very rarely, to they're everywhere. Looking at the trajectory, what do you think? What do you think is the case 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Are the Dawa guys going to fix this? Is Andrew Tate going to say that?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my question. You've described Islam as having 4 horsemen of Islamic apologetics. You want to tell us what that means and who they are?
Oh, are you talking about with like Ali Dawa and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Because I don't remember saying that. It sounds like something I would say.
Oh.
No, I realized.
You said it.
Yeah, I realized way back in the day, way back in the day, when you go back to when I was getting started, I was looking at, who the popular representatives of Islam. And back then it was, of course, you had Zakir Naik, but, Jamal Badawi and Shabir Ali and so on. You're looking at these guys and the things they're saying and saying, these guys are not an accurate reflection of what you might call the spirit of Islam. A lot of these guys, especially the guys, because Zakir Naik's mainly focused on India, which is a different environment, but the people who were selected to be the public faces of Islam in Western nations were handpicked for Western nations. In other words, here are the people who would be most appealing to a Western audience. But, if you've been reading the Muslim sources, you look at these guys and go, these guys do not sound at all like what they should sound like if Islam were true, apart from Islam allowing you to deceive people. So the issue arose where what would happen if you actually got different people as the public face of Islam? Like, what happens if Andrew Tate were to become the public face of Islam? Well, that would appeal to a lot of younger, more aggressive Muslims, but it would be a massive turnoff, let's say, to lots of other people in the world. So the situation you have right now is that you have people like Ali Dawa, Muhammad Hijab, Sheikh Uthman, and Daniel Hakikachu, but he's in a different category. But with those other guys, they're becoming like the public face of Islam. They're exploding in popularity, which I've seen lots of Christians like, oh, it was so much better when we were interacting with Shabir. No, it may feel like that. Yes, you would much rather deal with someone like Shabir, sitting down with someone like Shabir, rather than someone thumping his chest. Ah, man, I'm so strong. Let me insult your wife. Golden showers, right? Like people are like, I don't want to interact with that. And it's like, yeah, but now you're letting people see the true spirit of Islam, right? Because why is Shabir stagnant or decreasing in popularity, whereas these other guys who are just thumping their chest, everyone's scared of us, and I'm scared of us, me so strong. Those guys are the guys who explode in popularity. So in other words, what you have is 15 years ago, Muslim organizations handpicking people who are going to be most appealing to Western audiences, versus now the Muslims get to decide for themselves who they want as their champions. And so they're picking people like Muhammad Hijab, not people like Shabir Ali, because they're not realizing that's what's most appealing to them, to their community. That's not what is most appealing to other people. Other people are horrified at some of the behavior and antics. But the situation you have is we don't want just them. You really want Andrew Tate. That guy could be greater than all of them combined as far as exposing Islam. So, on the one hand, you think it's hilarious if like next week he announces that he's an apostate. But on the other hand, my goodness, just keep calling people to Islam until you are the public face of Islam in the world. Andrew Tate. That is a guy who should be the public face of Islam. But what you're dealing with right now, and I said Hakikachu is in a different category because he's not a narcissist, but the people who are becoming the public face of Islam are complete total narcissists. They're egomaniacs. They can't handle criticism. They want everyone around them agreeing with them and nodding at everything they say. And the problem is they disagree with each other on certain things, and that is a community that's very quick to attack each other. So if you have all of these guys, again, it's 4 right now that I can point at and say, here are guys who will destroy Islam from within. You'd love to see 7 or 10 or 15 or 20, because the idea is all these guys who are growing rapidly in popularity, you can look at the personality type. These are not people who could get along with other people who are exploding in popularity. There's eventually going to be conflict there. And right now, the Muslim community, whenever a conflict starts to arise, the Muslim community goes, stop, everyone's watching us. You can't do this right now. But they're not going to be able to hold that forever, right? And so are you going to try to deal with Ali Dawa being a narcissist when he's got 5 million followers? Is that when you're going to deal with him? So anyway, the point is, it's just inevitable. All these guys are eventually going to crash into each other, and all of them are going to have millions of followers. None of them is going to be willing to go down or step aside because they're narcissists. They have to be the center of the universe, and they're just going to rip it apart from within. So that's the situation Islam is in. I actually believe that we could all sit back and do nothing right now, and that it would eventually it would implode because of the people that they're choosing as their representatives. But we just get to keep the pressure on, because keep in mind, the more pressure we put on them, the more these guys rise in popularity. And so it's just they don't realize what they're doing. Yes, Andrew Tate converting is really impressive to a lot of young Muslims who are thumping their chests and so on. The rest of the world is looking at that going, what's going on? So anyway, keep in mind, the bigger picture here is this. Back when I started criticizing Islam, I had a problem with the ideology, but when I'm thinking of Muslims, I'm thinking of my friends. That's what I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking of like this, like horrible people. I'm thinking, hey, these guys are my friends. I want to get the truth to them, and so I'm going to criticize their religion. Over time, it comes where I'm not thinking of my friends or their families or anything like that. I'm thinking of these guys who are like sending me messages how they're going to, kill me and kill my wife and rape my mom and all these things. That's who I'm thinking of. So the idea is, for lots of people in the West, when we criticize Islam, for lots of people in the West, when they think, oh, Thaddeus can't be right with what he's saying about Muhammad because I know a Muslim at school and my Muslim friend at school isn't anything like that. So they're actually judging what the religion teaches based on their image of a Muslim in their head, right? Well, guess what? What happens when, instead of people thinking about their Muslim friends, when they're thinking about, the characteristic Muslim, what if they start thinking about Andrew Tate or Ali Dawah or something like that? All of a sudden, it becomes way more acceptable to blast away at Muhammad and the Quran. And by the way, this has already happened. If you go back 10 years, most of the complaints I got about how I was presenting information on Islam were coming from Christians. David, how dare you make fun of Muhammad in that way? How dare you go after that? You're just going to drive Muslims away and so on. Whereas now I very rarely get those criticisms, even though I can be much more brutal now. I could be, in the past couple of years, I've been way more brutal dealing with Islam than I was 10 years ago. And I get almost no complaints now. And I think part of it is because people have realized that it's effective. But another part of it is now they're not just thinking, wait a minute, I know a Muslim and that's all I know about Islam, but I know a really nice Muslim and he's my good friend. And so I can't believe what you're saying about Islam. Now they're thinking of all these guys running around cities. We're so strong, we'll crush you all, we destroy you. And so that's the situation. And I don't see anything they can do about it.
Yeah, I agree. He never returns, as a horse says, yes, we want the true face to wake up the West. That's not what I meant to bring up. Chris Kloss says, David is right. If you look at Ali Dawah or the Islamic Doxer or Mimi Hijab, Muslims financially support them, but Muslims don't financially support Shabir and others. And I'd say even just in the time I've been doing this, 4 years or so, when I first started, people usually reference Zakir Naik, like not ironically. They would actually point to Zakir Naik. Now it's almost always hijab. There was a little period where people were pointing to Farid Responds, but he didn't quite catch on, I guess. Now it's like always hijab. It's always hijab. That's who they've decided is their number one champion. And he's like the worst face of Islam you could imagine.
Yeah, again, people who weren't active here 15 years ago don't know. Right. But, you go back 15 years ago, Shabir was the guy. That was the guy. That was the guy for Muslims in the West. Now, nope. Ali Dawah, Hijab, Sheikh Uthman, right? These are their guys now. And guys, you're talking about people with completely different personality types, personality defects that are going to cause a lot of problems down the road. So notice that Christians are still, I already pointed this out, but Christians are still reluctant. They want the guy who's nice. They want the guy who's nice. I would much rather interact with the guy who's nice. No, the guy who's nice is not giving people an accurate picture of what Islam is. You want the guys who are more like, hijab and so on. But there's just it's going to snowball, because once these guys become your champions, then more people are going to be turned off to Islam. More people are going to be criticizing it because it's going to be more acceptable to criticize and mock Muhammad. So and once you do that, then where do you turn? You have to turn even more to your champions, who are the ones causing your problem, right? It reminds me of someone like, in a boat and doesn't realize, if they've been in a boat at several days at sea and they're thirsty, someone who doesn't realize you shouldn't drink seawater, so they drink some seawater. I'm thirsty, let me drink some seawater. Oh no, now I'm more thirsty, I need to drink more seawater. Oh no, now I'm even more thirsty, I need to drink more. And then it kills you and you don't realize it. It's the champions they are choosing, and they're going to choose more, but the champions they are choosing are the ones who are causing more of a backlash against their fake prophet and their book. And so more people are going to be turned against their religion. There's going to be more criticism. But where do you turn? If you're a Muslim, now you're being attacked more. You turn even more to these guys to be your defenders. And so they become more popular. And so we just have this awesome spiral right now. And I see no other outcome other than massive avalanche.
I agree. Iqbal Swati said, "What is your biggest objection against Islam?" Which is something I already wanted to ask you, but I want to ask you two different ways. First, I want to ask you what you think the strongest argument is. And I don't mean most effective. I mean the one that's hardest to counter legitimately, honestly, logically.
The Islamic dilemma. Now, it's an interesting point to bring up without going into a lot of detail, but the deeper you go, the more you find out how big a problem this is. And so anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, every Muslim you'll run into says your Bible's been corrupted. That's not what their prophet and their God said. Their prophet and their God affirmed the inspiration and the preservation and the present ongoing authority of the scriptures of Jews and Christians. The problem is the scriptures of Jews and Christians completely contradict Islam. I'm talking about fundamental doctrines. So you've got a problem here because there are two possibilities. Either Christians have the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of God, or we don't. If we have the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of God, Islam is false because it contradicts what we have on fundamental doctrines. But if we don't have the inspired, preserved, authoritative word of God, Islam is still false because Islam affirms the inspiration, preservation, and authority of our scriptures. So if Christians have the word of God, Islam is false. If Christians don't have the word of God, Islam is false. It's got to be one or the other, and therefore Islam has to be false no matter what. And if you look at how Muslims respond to this, the way they have to twist the verses in their own book to make it sound like the Quran is saying our book's been corrupted. Anytime your only option in responding is deception, you realize you got a problem here, right? So in other words, you can bring up the Islamic dilemma very quickly, just as I did. And Muslim apologists will respond to it. And it will sound good to their followers who are desperate to have a response. But the moment you start examining the responses, nope, that's not what that verse means. And the fact that you have to appeal to that verse as if it means that shows how big a problem you have here. So, yeah, I think this is the problem with the Islamic dilemma is since there are verses Muslims love to misuse, and all of them are massively misused. As soon as you start looking into what those verses are actually saying, it has nothing to do with corruption of the Jewish or Christian scriptures. But the problem with it is it actually takes a significant amount of time to go into detail, right? In other words, you have to actually learn what those verses mean in context. You may have to go to commentaries and so on to show what those verses actually mean. That can be very time consuming. So even though I would say it's the strongest argument against Islam, it can be very time consuming to use effectively. You can give a quick version. It's great to give a quick version. If you're actually interacting with a Muslim and want to use this, you may be there for a while. But I'd say it's worth it. In fact, if I could change one thing in the world of like apologetics and polemics, it would be to get Christians and Muslims to know what the Quran says about the Bible. If you could do that, I'd say it's over, because now you can no longer criticize the Bible because your God and your prophet affirmed it.
Yeah, there's a few things that I would consider absolute contradictions that there's no way around logically, and that's one of them, definitely. But what about the related question of what's the most effective argument in practice? Because people don't necessarily make decisions based on logic. So what do you think the most effective argument is?
I'll give you my answer and Nabil's answer, because we give a little bit different answers. I think just blasting away at Muhammad, the character of Muhammad, is most effective. And it's because Muslims have been raised to think that he's this ideal pattern of conduct, and their leaders have convinced them that he was this perfect, wonderful guy who never did anything wrong, and have hidden all of the actual information from their sources about how messed up this guy was. So when you present information about, uh, Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old girl, Muhammad taking the wife of his own adopted son, Muhammad buying, selling, trading black African slaves, and so on. It's all this. It's all stuff that they've been taught Muhammad would never do, and so it becomes very easy to get them to realize that they can't trust everything their leaders have been telling them. So that's my position. Nabil's position was the exposing the myth of the textual perfect preservation of the Quran. Which he said that. He said, no, I mean, if you want to destroy something, destroy this. This is the most important direction to go. Exposing changes to the Quran. I was like, I mean, who cares? So what if you actually showed them that there are textual variants in the Quran? It doesn't mean that Islam is false. Whereas in reality, and this I've seen over the years, why Nabil may actually be correct. I mean, he's definitely correct in how powerful this is. As far as this being the best direction to go, he may be right. I'm not sure. I still like going after Muhammad. But Nabil's point was similar to what I was saying about Muhammad in that, yes, I don't think it would, because keep in mind, for the early centuries of Islam, they didn't believe in perfect preservation. So you obviously can be a Muslim and not believe in perfect preservation of the Quran. But it produces a similar result to what I was saying with a Muslim realizing, wait, these guys have told me all my life Muhammad's the greatest man who ever lived, and yet he's doing all these things that if someone did them, I would say he needs to be locked up forever. So what's going on here? And the goal there is them realizing that they can't trust what their leaders were telling them because their leaders are liars. But I think Nabil is in a similar direction where if you show someone textual variants in Quran manuscripts or differences between the different qira'at or sources saying, Muslim sources talking about changes to the Quran, then it's, wait a minute, all my leaders have told me perfect preservation right down to the letter. So that's false. What's that mean? Okay, if these guys have been telling me something that's false, and keep in mind, if you're talking about scholars like Yasser Qadi and so on, well, they knew that there were variants and they lied anyway. So I think Nabil's perspective is you're actually showing Muslims that because the Quran has changed, one, that was one of their main reasons for thinking that the Quran is true, is this miraculous preservation. So you've undermined one of their main arguments, but simultaneously you've shown that their dawah guys and their scholars have been lying to them. And wait a minute, if you've been lying to me about that, what else have you been lying to me about? I can't trust anything you're saying anymore, so I need to go and research this for myself. And as soon as someone says, I'm going to research this for myself because I can't trust these guys anymore because they're liars, that's someone who's on his way out of Islam. So anyway, those are two possibilities. Do what you want with it.
Yeah, I agree. Moral arguments tend to be the most powerful, and to ordinary people, like you said, going after Muhammad, it's interesting that it's not surprising, but it is interesting that Muslims would have such a big problem with the perfect preservation, because it's such a dumb argument to begin with, as you pointed out. But
yeah,
as you said, if they're shown that they've been lied to, then it's like, well, what else have I been lied to about? Because really, there's no reason to lie about perfect preservation. It doesn't get you anything. But I think it was invented specifically as a polemic against Christianity, because Christians are open about having textual variants and such.
Yeah, it was that's why it was invented. That's why the lie was spread, and they spread the lie in an atmosphere where no one was in a position to correct them. So actual Muslim scholars and apologists and so on decide, hey, we can lie about this because guess what? Christians don't know anything about the textual history of the Quran. They don't know. And when they started spreading this, no one had their sources to show in the Muslim sources where they talk about changes to the Quran. No one was familiar with manuscripts or textual variants and so on in the manuscripts. No one was familiar with the different qira'at. They were speaking in an atmosphere of total ignorance, so they could say whatever they want. And they just weren't counting on the time when, actually, a couple decades down the road, people are going to have the internet and people are going to start showing in the Muslim sources where there are all these changes to the Quran, and in manuscripts where there are differences in the manuscripts, and even in different Qurans in different parts of the world today, there are differences. And, then all of a sudden you have Hatun showing up to Speaker's Corner with 37 different Qurans. And no, those are all the same. Those are no. Let's open them up. What's this word? Oh, what's this word over here? Is that the same word or is that different? And then wait a minute, this is not what I've been told. And so this is just what happens. You keep in mind, anyone could get away with this. Anyone could come and just completely lie about their position to make it sound good. And you could say anything you want. A Christian could do this, right? I could walk up to someone right now and say, do you know that Oxford University just published a study and they've declared that Christianity is 100% indisputably true? Did you know that? Yes, Professor Uppingfoth of Oxford University did this study. It can make up something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the cost is eventually someone's going to look up what you're saying and find out that you're a liar. Well, Dalwagandis didn't have anything else to do. They had nowhere else to go but lie. So they just went all in on lying, and now it's catching up with them.
Exactly. Denatrius says the problem of regular Muslims is that they do not read their sources. The moment
Correct.
they find something disturbing, they run to the sheikh who lies and soothes them, and they continue to live as a lie. And then I have a couple of related comments.
Oh, but by the way, perfect example of what I was just saying. So, you take an argument like the Islamic dilemma. Muslims, you're talking to a Muslim, your Bible's been corrupted. I say, okay, why does your God command me to judge by the gospel if the gospel's been corrupted? Why would he do that? Huh? Never heard it. He's never read the verse before. He has no clue what he's talking about. So he runs to his apologist or his imam. What do I do about this? Oh, what that means is, the original gospel that they know, and they'll believe some lie. And so that's why I said it's like time consuming to go through all this. But that is a perfect description. It's their leaders lie to them. Perfect preservation. And then we have to give them the correct information. So we explain it, but then they run back to the same guy who was lying to them before. Oh, how do you explain this? And what now? Oh, now. And it's more lies. So again, you're looking for this sort of light switch moment where they realize, wait a minute, this guy keeps lying to me. Maybe I should not believe him anymore and should study this for myself. But yeah, Demetrius nailed it.
Yeah, so along those lines, pointing out the problem there, and then a couple people asking what we can do about this. Mark says we need a book on how a Muslim can transition to Christianity, and Servant Girl pointed out that book exists in Seeking Allah and Finding Jesus. But I want to ask you, how can Christians take these arguments that you and others make? How can we be effective in our outreach to Muslims? Because they are just going to run back to their imams or their parents or whoever they trust most of the time. So how can we be most effective in our outreach efforts?
Well, it's one, it's going to depend on what kind of outreach you're doing. So like making YouTube videos is very different from, interacting with Muslims on a college campus or something like that. So it's different situations. But I view it as better when you say, hey, how can someone else use an argument or something like that? I think it's actually better if it's an individual using an argument with a particular Muslim that he knows. In other words, I can make a video blasting away at Muhammad, and a Muslim might watch that and might go back to his scholar or something like that and get a response, and then think, David is destroyed, ha 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 ha, and then it doesn't go any further. You're actually in a much better situation, evangelism wise, apologetics wise, polemics wise. I have an advantage in that I can get something out to a massive number of people very quickly, rather, as opposed to talking to someone one-on-one. But as far as actually effectively sharing the gospel, sharing problems with Islam, sharing arguments with someone, you're in a much better position if it's you and another person that you become friends with. And so and notice that's how I was interacting with Nabil. It was not, hey, here's my video that I made or something like that. We're talking back and forth. And Christians need to understand that if you're talking about people who've been indoctrinated all their lives, don't think you're just going to run up and share the gospel and the Muslim's going to convert. If a Muslim does, that Muslim was already dealing with something before you got there. Or it's just a flat out miracle, because most of the time even to get the gospel across to them, you've got a lot of work to do. So get that in your mind ahead of time. I'm talking to a guy, and this may take 4 years or 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, but it'll be worth it. So get that into your minds, but just get in the habit of, I mean, get it in your head that this may take a long time. 2, get it into your head that that this Muslim that you're talking to it may take a while, and is going to come back, and is going to offer refutations, and is going to go to his imam and so on, and that you don't need to know everything ahead of time. I've seen so many Christians who don't want to get started because it's, I'd have to know all the hadith, and I'd have to know the Quran, and I have to know the tafsir, and the Muslim may have 57 different objections to everything I'm saying. Get that out of your head, especially if you're talking to a Muslim one-on-one. If you're talking to a Muslim and he gives you some response that you're not familiar with, say, okay, I haven't thought of that before. Would you mind if I looked into this before I respond? Then go study it. You don't need to know everything ahead of time. You need to be listening carefully to what this particular person is saying to you, and then be willing to invest the time to go learn how to respond to that person's objection. But that is a much better way to proceed. And you can get all of the same information that we share in our videos. You can get all that same information across to a Muslim friend. In fact, it's better that way, right? I mean, if a Muslim sees me and I'm making fun of Muhammad for having sex with a 9-year-old girl, maybe he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. You could get the same information across to a Muslim friend without that person not wanting to talk to you anymore. You could do it differently. Instead of saying, hey, your prophet's a pedophile or something like that, you say, hey, you're talking about how Muhammad is the greatest man who ever lived. I was just wondering, because I was reading an article about him and something with one of his wives. I was just wondering how you would interpret that. How does that fit in with your belief that he's the greatest man who ever lived? Because I would think that that's not a good thing to do. What do you think? And there, you're not attacking, you're not making fun of it. You're asking for his input and so on. But the idea is you'd be getting across the same kinds of information that we're talking about when we say, what's the most powerful, what's the most effective arguments against Islam? So notice, if you're talking to a Muslim, you say, so what do you believe in Islam? And he says, because the Quran's been perfectly preserved. You start, okay, well, hey, would you mind if I looked into that? Guess what? If a Muslim actually believes the Quran's been perfectly preserved, he will think it's great if you want to look into it. And then you come back to him a couple days later and say, hey, you mentioned this argument, and I said I would look into it. And I was just wondering, you said the Quran's been perfectly preserved. So, I was reading this passage. It says that verses were eaten by a sheep. These verses were revealed as the Quran. And Aisha says they were eaten by a sheep, and they're no longer in the Quran today. So I was just wondering how you reconcile that with your belief in perfect preservation. And notice, everything you bring up to that Muslim is stuff he's never heard before. He's never heard any of this. So you're getting the same information into his head that we want to get through. We want to get this information to Muslims through our videos. But you could get the same information and do it in a probably more effective manner, because if you actually have a friendship with the Muslim, you can be doing it over a longer period of time, and you can deal with, objections and replies and things like that, and so on. Over time, notice that Muslim will not just accept that Muhammad's not a great man after you give him some information. You're looking to reach a kind of critical mass. Okay, so this is his defense of Muhammad and Aisha, and this is defense of Muhammad taking the wife of his own adopted son, and this is a defense of Muhammad saying you could beat your wives into submission. This is a defense, and eventually you reach this kind of critical mass of, how am I still defending this guy? How am I doing it? How am I doing it? Like, and the point you eventually want to get across is, hey, you've tried to justify these 30 different horrible things that Muhammad did, where if anyone else did them, you would say it's a horrible person. But whenever your prophet does something, you just come up with some excuse for why he did it. What is your basis for saying this guy's the greatest man who ever lived? Like what? What did he do? Oh, but he once helped an orphan. So did lots of people. You don't say they're the greatest people who ever lived. And the people who normally do it did not marry, a 6-year-old. So what do you mean? What are your criterion? What are your criteria to judge who this great man is? And so anyway, it's just breaking down decades of indoctrination in a person. But it takes time. It takes time, but can be worth it. And I'll just point out to people, there were Christians who told me, as I was spending years talking to Bill, there were Christians who were saying, David, you're wasting your time. If you were going to believe, you would have believed already. You're spending way too much time. You could be talking to so many other people. You're spending all this time talking to this guy. Anyway, I'll just have to say, I don't think it was a waste of time.
Perfect. Rory, who's an ex-Muslim himself, says, approach them gently. And then he says, that was me being too aggressive to an ordinary Muslim. I said, your prophet was a pedophile and he didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I would say that as long as you're having a real conversation, you know, with an actual human being that you have some sort of relationship to, if you say, I don't know the answer, along the lines of what David said, I don't know, I need to research that, no reasonable person is going to hold that against you. In fact, they'd probably be more receptive to what you have to say when you come back, with you showing humility and saying, I don't know everything, and I could be wrong. And hey, you could be wrong too. So let's figure this out together. Al said this method is effective for sure. I've used this with people in many different cults and even atheists. Sola Scriptura said, be gentle with them at first, but don't let them lead you away from the topic. And then finally from Walking Dreams, hello guys, I'm a woman. I don't feel comfortable converting people who talk to moms. And that's actually a very important thing, that if you do happen to be a woman, or actually it's important advice for both men and women, and you're talking to Muslims, you want to talk to Muslims of the same sex, because it's considered offensive to, whether you're a man trying to talk to a woman or a woman trying to talk to a man, it's usually considered offensive. So be culturally sensitive. You know, in your case, I would say, you know, mostly focus on talking to Muslim women. Anything you want to add, David?
Nope, you're correct.
All right.
For once.
So I have a few questions on Islam that I wanted to read from the audience. But first from Rice, who just joined the chat as a Muslim. David has been destroyed by Muhammad Hijab, Sheikh Uthman, and Daniel Hitikachu. David is a loser. David, you're being debunked all over TikTok. I think he kind of, you didn't make a prophecy, but he did kind of come in and prove your point, right? He's all about bravado here. He's not giving any arguments. He insists that he told me that he was here to correct you and show that you have bad arguments. And then this is what he posts. Amazing stuff there.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know. I didn't realize they were after me on TikTok, but it's cool to know. I've only been on TikTok like once or twice. I watched a couple of Inspiring Philosophies videos over there because he was responding to some Muslims and so on.
Yeah, I'm not on TikTok either, but I understand that if you think arguments on YouTube are bad, then you haven't seen anything until you go over to TikTok. So
yeah, it looks just based on what it looked like with Inspiring Philosophy, because he's responding to arguments that not a lot of people even use anymore on YouTube because we've destroyed them so thoroughly. So what it really looks like on TikTok is that Muslim apologists realize that it's a younger generation over there, and they haven't seen these arguments exposed, and so they can use the same dumb, completely refuted, bogus arguments to defend Islam over there to a younger crowd. And so it's like, I mean, how much more obvious could you make it that you guys do not care about truth when you're over on TikTok using the Song of Solomon 5:16 argument for Muhammad? It's like you have to know, after dealing with our criticisms there, you have to know that is the stupidest argument ever. And so you won't use it on YouTube anymore. You run over to TikTok because we're not there.
Yeah, well, there's something for someone looking to get into ministry, get into apologetics. TikTok is calling. Needs more Christians on TikTok. Hakeem Rashid gave a super chat. Thank you very much for that. And asked this question. David, what are your sources regarding Muslims praying at the same time as Sabians?
The Sabians, it wasn't just that. It was they also had the Shahada. So they prayed. The Sabians prayed 7 times a day. 5 of the times were the same times as Muslims. Then they had 2 additional. They had 2 additional prayers. But they also had the Shahada, La ilaha illallah. And Muhammad just tacked on the part about himself to their Shahada. To the point where this is according to Muslim commentators. Muslims early on were confused with Sabians. They were confused. They were accused of being, people thought they were Sabians because they were saying similar things and praying at similar times and so on. But there are, let me see if I can find it real quick. A lot of this was an earlier work. Let me go to answering. In other words, I might just be able to pull it up for you real quick. If you, what section was this? I'm on the Answering Islam website, so answeringislam.net. Gosh, the article was called something like Sources of Islam. Let me just search for it. It's by something Saint Sinclair Tyndall, something like that. Let's see. I'm talking about a good introductory article, but he goes through this of Islam. Not Nels. No, here we go. If you go to, wait, can I share a link?
Yeah, you can share screen, or you won't be able to post a link in the chat. You got to post something else first, and then I can make you a moderator, and then you'll be able to post a link. But if you post a link, YouTube will just auto block it.
Yeah, I don't think I need to do that. If you go to answering, let's go ahead and talk, and I will because I have to bring up the thing, but I'll do it in a second. But we can talk about other stuff while I'm sending this.
Yep, we can come back to that. Lloyd posted that Muhammad Sukra al-Zusi compared the Sabians' religious practice to Islam in his work. So, enforcing your point there that Muslims are saying the same thing, that they're saying that, hey, the Sabians seem to be seem to have a lot of the same practices as us. And I think they debated, right, whether or not they were true Muslims, the Sabians, which is crazy since Muhammad's supposed to be bringing a new religion and this predates them. But hey.
I just typed testing.
Yep, I see that. Add moderator. All right, you're a moderator now.
I feel so cool. Let me see if this link works. That link work?
Don't see it.
I see it on mine. It's right under Rockstar. So it's testing, then.
That's odd.
Not
Gave me the
up.
message that said
send it again.
I made you a moderator.
You didn't. I'm not blue.
All right, I'm trying again. All right, try again.
Was this amateur hour here?
Probably. I mean, I'm in charge.
Let me refresh and see if this works. Oh yeah, now I'm blue.
There again, I should be able to post the link.
There you go.
All right. Yes, I see it. So it worked.
Plenty of interesting stuff there on the Sabians.
It's the original sources of the Quran by William, I think it's William St. Clair Isdale. W anyway. Yeah. So take a look at that article. I have a couple more, or since I brought up Lloyd, I'll do his question next. Lloyd wanted me to ask you about the Sharia. The final doctrine of Islam is not necessarily the Quran or the Hadith. It's actually what the scholars decide about what the Quran and the Hadith say. So he puts a lot of his work into looking at that as found in the Sharia. What do you think about using this type of argument, trying to go, above the level of the average Muslim and go to the level their scholars are speaking at?
Yeah, I mean, it's best to have a multi-pronged approach, but yeah, I mean, conclusions of later scholars. I mean, on the one hand, according to Islam, they can't have any authority beyond the Quran and the Hadith. If they were to go against it somehow, then the Quran and Hadith would overrule them. But yeah, in practice, most of what your Muslims say is just coming from their apologists or scholars. But yeah, I mean, no, you need all approaches. You need people, like, probably the most important thing is to just popularize information about Muhammad. So what we're doing, we're taking things that Muslims don't know and that the world doesn't know, and we're trying to make it so that the world does know them. But yeah, you can. There are a lot of other things that are very helpful. Dealing with the scholarship, dealing with even fine points of Sharia, even Christians who become scholars in the field of Islamic studies and so on, who then interact with material at a scholarly level. Yeah, so guys, there's all kinds of things that are extremely helpful right now.
Just going back to what I said earlier, Ruth says that when she puts videos on TikTok, they often get 1,000 or more views in an hour. So again, major opportunity there for someone who wants to get into that. There's plenty of opportunity. The harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few. So I definitely encourage people to get into this. A couple more questions for you. Tamari says that I heard somewhere that Muhammad was inspired by an Aryan monk. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, as one influence, but yeah, Muhammad's just a compilation of all these ideas that were around him during his time. So if you look at, I mean, Islam has all these ideas from Judaism, not just the Torah, but from the Talmud as well. And Muhammad doesn't seem to understand the difference. Neither does Allah. They don't seem to understand the difference between the Torah and the Talmud. They have all of these ideas that are taken from Christian groups, sometimes from heretical Christian sects, because there were sects of Christianity that were banned from the Roman Empire, and who then had followers who moved to the Middle East, and they brought some interesting sources with them and so on. We find the same stories from them in the Quran. And then you have various pagan practices like the pilgrimage to Mecca and walking circles around the Kaaba and so on. I think it was the Persians who had their view of a paradise of sensual delights with houris and so on, these virgins that you get in paradise and so on. So Islam just looks like Muhammad took everything that was around him during his time and he rolled it up into a ball, and that's his new religion. And so it's exactly the sort of religion you would expect to come out of this sort of combination of features that you had in 7th century Arabia. And so yeah, Muhammad is influenced by all kinds of people.
Absolutely. I agree that there's so many influences to Islam. The one thing that it doesn't seem to draw much from is Orthodox Christianity. That's about the only thing it ignores that was going on at the time. Question from Messianic Apostate. What do you make out of the modern Muslim narrative that ISIS are the modern day Qawri? Sorry, I don't actually know how to pronounce that.
I mean, ISIS looks like standard Sunni Islam without compromise. You know what I mean? It looks just like, in other words, if I were to just read the Muslim sources and say, okay, Muhammad died, Abu Bakr took over afterwards, and he had to deal with a bunch of situations that were rising, apostasy and so on. What did he do? Well, he just cracked down on everything, declared war on anyone, not just people who were renouncing Islam in its entirety, but just people who were disagreeing with mainstream Sunni Islam. He said he was coming to fight them. If you deviated in any way from his understanding of Islam, he was coming to slaughter you. And that looks exactly like ISIS to me. So I would consider it standard Sunni Islam taken to its logical conclusion here. And by the way, notice it. I mean, it's a very similar situation, and that's why the first caliph of ISIS declared himself. He called himself Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. He's the Abu Bakr of Baghdad, right? So he's the new Abu Bakr. This wasn't his real name. He's declared himself to be the new Abu Bakr because it was similar situations. In early Islam, they still had to deal with all these, rebellions and so on, but their prophet just died. What are we going to do? Well, you got to cleanse and purify the community for Allah to bless you. And Abu Bakr cracked down on everyone, and Islam expanded rapidly. And so you're looking at that. Hey, we're dealing with a similar situation. Everyone seems more powerful than us. What are we going to do? We got all these rebellions and so on. People rebelling against Islam. What are we going to do? We got to crack down. And so it seems like that's what it looks like to me.
All right, just a couple more. Rory asks if there's a background hadith to Quran 5:32. He says, or tafsir. Well, there's definitely tafsir. There's tafsir on everything. I don't know what that verse is offhand. Do you want me to pull it up, or do you know what it is offhand?
I mean, so yeah. Well, for 533, yeah, there's a situation where that's tied to events where Muhammad was, let's say, behaving pretty brutally towards people who disagreed with him and so on. But yeah, I would just Rory, go to Ibn Kathir. You can go to Ibn Kathir online, and that's see the site, because they over the years they keep changing the site where you can get something like Ibn Kathir. It's m.qtafsir.com. You got Abu Bakr, you got Ibn Kathir's commentary there, but that's got plenty of background on both those verses and the understanding of 14 centuries of Muslims, which had nothing to do with how Muslims use it today. No, 14 centuries of Muslims did not use this to show that Islam is peaceful and tolerant. You read the passage in its entirety, it's quite the opposite. But then you also have to go to Mishnah Sanhedrin to get chapter 4, but to get the actual quotation that Muhammad stole 532 from.
Excellent. Rick asked, do you think more apologists should focus on the doctrine of lying and heal as a way to stop people falling from the cult? So should we point out that lying's built into Islam, basically?
Yeah, you got to be careful, though, because when I've just seen this tendency from lots of people. So it's indisputable that lying is acceptable in various situations in Islam. But the tendency is if you spread that, if you focus on that, then people always think their Muslim friends lying to them when they say, Islam's a religion of peace. And so you have to qualify and say, hey, I'm not saying that any Muslim who tells you something that's wrong is lying. Most Muslims, if they tell you, the vast majority of Muslims, when they tell you that the Quran's been perfectly preserved, aren't lying. They're wrong. It's false, but they're not lying. Their scholars are lying. Their scholars lied to them, but they're not lying. They're telling you what they believe, even though it's false. So there is just this concern that people start thinking every time a Muslim says something is false, the Muslim's lying and you can't trust him, when lots of Muslims believe this stuff because their scholars are liars. So yeah, it's important for people to know that deception is allowed. But yeah, just be careful with it.
Walking Dreams asks, do we stand a chance with Islam in the world?
What are you guys talking about? Islam is going to crumble before our eyes. All I see when I look at it is, all I think when I look at it is, the Almighty has delivered you into our hands. I'm talking about the ideology. So for 14 centuries, Islam spreads. And if you wanted to reach Muslims with the gospel, you had to go to some Muslim country where if you're at all successful, you're going to get your head chopped off. Christians did it, but they got their heads chopped off. All of a sudden, right when we get down to the age where people say, you know what? It's actually unstoppable just by birth rates. They're going to outnumber you in a few decades. What can you possibly do? And that just happens to be the same time when all of a sudden we have millions of Muslims living in the West. So now you don't have to go to a place where you're going to get your head chopped off. Now there are Muslims, who live down the street from you. So that's one. Two, all of a sudden we get open access to Muslims, even in Muslim countries. So for 14 centuries, if you want to preach the gospel to a Muslim, you had to go to, Arabia or something like that, where you're going to get your head chopped off. Now you can talk to a Muslim in Saudi Arabia on your phone, right? You can right now on Facebook, you could go talk to a Muslim right now on YouTube, on Twitter. You can talk to Muslims, so they are no longer insulated by their leaders. So you have that. And then also simultaneously with all of this, for 14 centuries, critics of Islam, there were exceptions. There were people who did, go to their sources and so on. But for the most part, the incredibly vast majority of the population did not have access to Muslim sources to refute what Muslims are saying. So, if earlier in the 20th century, and even before that, you had some translations of the Quran, but your main translations of their sources, like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, was that like the 1980s when those were even available, and now we have all of them right online. So I'm looking at this saying, hey, just when we're a few decades away from saying, oh, now it's all hopeless, they're going to outnumber you, now you just get everything you possibly need to take down the ideology, to expose the lies. I don't know. I look at it and say, the Almighty just gave your ideology into our hands, and we're gonna crush it.
Excellent. Yeah. I would not get the call for pessimism, because we're just getting started in this. We've only been seriously criticizing, all critics of Islam, not like David or I or even Christians specifically, but people have only been criticizing Islam in a serious way for, 20 years or so. And we've already seen all this damage.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been keeping this up. And keep in mind, you go back, 15, 16 years ago, there were not a lot of people. There was like one guy in Australia, Samuel Green, and there's one guy in Canada, Tony Costa. And there were a couple in America. In the UK, there was Jay Smith. There was like you could count on like 5 or 6 fingers how many of us there were who were dealing with Islam. And now you've got 25% of young Muslims leaving Islam. So notice, this is just getting started. I don't know why anyone, oh no, it's hopeless. What are you talking about? We've been at this for a few years now, and you are getting apostasy rates of 25%, and that's accelerating. Right? It looks like 5 years from now, it's going to be like 50%. How are you going to hold it together then?
Yeah. And I don't see how Islam can survive, because again, I pointed this out earlier, but Christianity faced a lot of problems because of the academic criticism of it starting around 150 years ago. And we have answers. We because of that criticism, we've now studied the issues and we have very good answers. Christianity holds up to scrutiny. Islam doesn't have that to fall back on. I don't see how it can stand long term.
No, and keep in mind, even though you have Muslims running around thumping their chest, we're going to outnumber you, we're going to crush you. What are they actually talking about at their conferences when it's just them? They're talking about the avalanche of apostasy and what do we do about all these young Muslims leaving Islam? What do we do about it? So that's the situation they're in.
Yahya says, I like how rational David Wood is, and I like that about him too. He says, Islam ruined democracy in my country by bringing Islamic jihadists to power back in the 90s. They slaughter everyone. Everybody slaughter everybody. Secularism was lost. We gained it from European conquest. I don't know specifically which Muslim majority country he lives in, but common story. So we've been going a little over 2.5 hours. I just have a couple personal questions to close out with. First of all, Michael G said, I thought David Wood died. I don't see his videos these days. Is he running out of content. I suspect he might be a Muslim based on the way he phrased this.
Mm-hmm.
But are you running out of content, David?
No, I actually have. See, even when I'm not making videos, I'm constantly putting content together. I've actually studied enough material where I could run. I have enough content to run 3 channels, posting about 2 videos a week for the next couple of years. Like I already have the content. It's just actually making the videos. So yeah, not running out of content.
Shocking, I'm sure. Let's see. This was a super chat earlier from Thane Hatu. Thank you for that donation. Hi, David. Do you feel discouraged sometimes when keyboard jihadis send you death threats? May our Lord protect you. Thanks for your good work. We're all proud of you.
No, never. I figure if you're threatening to murder me, then you're worried about what I've been doing. And so I take those as signals, right? Because keep in mind, I'll try different things. So I'll try all kinds of different things. And all of a sudden, oh, wait, you just flipped out over what? Oh, okay. That is good to know. So like take something like Muhammad's Boom Boom Room. We made a video one day. We're trying to make fun of the BBC, right? Where we made a fake BBC interview where I was a BBC reporter and John McCrae played R. Kelly and Vocab dressed up as Muhammad. Then he wasn't doing any sort of voice or accent or something like that. The point we were trying to expose was these Western media organizations, they do nothing but praise Muhammad when they would condemn anyone else for doing similar things. So we had the BBC guy interview R. Kelly, and he's blasting him as a horrible individual. But then he interviews Muhammad, who did way more horrible stuff, and he's just praising him for being so wonderful. And so that was the only point. But after that, a lot of people flipped out and were sending messages. So it was like, oh, you don't like having your prophet in an interview, huh? And so that's the origin of Muhammad's Boom Boom Room. So
excellent.
So point was, no, I do not get discouraged at all from death threats. The death threats are more along the lines of, oh, I just hit a soft spot. Hey, thank you for that information you've just shared with me.
Yeah, I have a similar reaction when Muslims come in and leave comments that are nasty. I'm like, hey, this video actually hurt them. And, some videos, no one leaves a comment. Others, they come in.
But by the way, it's the reverse is true as well. Namely, if Muslims start praising, I've seen Christians who fall for this, and Muslims start praising them, they go, oh, you see, I'm really getting through to them. It's like, do you think you're getting through to them when they're praising you? You know what I mean? Like I've seen, hey, yeah. Muslims tell me they really like the way I do things. Like, do you think they'd say that about you if they really thought you were going to lead Muslims out of Islam? Do you think they'd be praising you right now? Are you serious? How are you falling for this?
Lots of people saying how much they love Boom Boom Room. And
I still got to post that. I still got to post that episode. Andrew Tate. I got the Andrew Tate episode on my computer.
I was actually going to ask you that. Roy said, when will Andrew Tate meet Muhammad?
Yeah. He's already met Muhammad. I have the video footage. I have the video proof. I have to go through the sources because I have to pull up I want sources on the screen for some of the stuff Muhammad is saying about Islamic paradise and deflowering virgins for eternity and so on. I want those on the screen. So I just have to insert those and make the thumbnail. That video is ready to go. So yeah, every time I say I'll just do that today, disaster strikes immediately. Like I know as soon as I say it, I'm going to go and there's going to be this disaster right outside. But if nothing weird happens, I'll send that to L can have that tonight. We'll see what happens.
Excellent.
But yeah, look, check Act 17 polemics tomorrow and it should be up.
Super chat, or super duper chat, I should say, from Harry L. Johnson. Thank you for that. Messianic Apostate would like to know if you've read a book called The Way of the Strangers, Encounters with the Islamic State.
No.
I haven't heard of that either. Mark asked if there'll be one world religion in the last days. Do you want to give any thoughts on that, or pass on that one?
How would I know? The last days haven't gotten here yet.
Excellent. Fair answer. Emmanuel Shahid, not really a question, but I wanted to pull this up. He said, David, I appreciate your early years of answering Islam of you and Sam. I was all day and night researching while floating in the ocean during my time in the Navy in 2002. Presumably he was still a Muslim at that time, and then he ended up leaving Islam. I mean, I know he left Islam and became a Christian. So I'm presuming that this research that he's doing is being prompted by you back in the early 2000s. There was another super chat. Guys, I'm trying to close out here. You got to stop leaving these super chats.
People always say they want the video, but then they don't let me make it because they keep giving super chats to Thaddeus.
Does David have the hikmah?
Oh, he's got the hikmah.
Thank you for that donation, Millennial Witness. There was one thing that I wanted to close out on. Oh, yes. This was from earlier, but it was after the time you were talking about your own plans. David Warren, I assume this is a legitimate question, which just emphasizes that people have not been paying attention. He asked if David's planning on making a new YouTube channel. So yes. I have links to the 3 channels that post David's contents. I don't know the legal status of those channels, but the 3 channels that he's posted content on so far, there's links to those in the description. He's definitely putting out new content. He definitely is not just sitting back doing nothing. Any closing thoughts from you, David?
Yeah, just because it's weird to see people discouraged, about Islam or death threats or anything else like that. Guys, if you want to, 14 centuries, there's an ideology that's wreaked havoc on the world. We get to be the generation that crushes the ideology. And if you're a Christian, you want to reach Muslims with the gospel, there is no better generation to be in ever. Right? It's easy to look around and say, oh, there's this problem, there's that problem. Focus on the core. There is if you want to reach Muslims with the gospel, 14 centuries of Christians who interacted with Muslims and had that same desire couldn't have dreamed of the opportunities you have right now. So do not be discouraged. Look at the amazing opportunities we've been blessed with, and do what you got to do.
Professor Yaffel, who is a supporter of me on Patreon, says support Thaddeus on Patreon. It's fun. It's not about money. It's not about doing this, but I would love to be able to put more time into this. So if you want to sign up on my Patreon, it would be very much appreciated. We'll end with this comment from Casey. Jesus Christ is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords forever. Amen, Casey. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great week. Special thanks to David for agreeing to do this show, and for everyone who joined us live. Had about double my record number of people watching live. So thank you all for making this a big success. Go and serve the Lord. God bless. All right, we should be backstage now.